Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gabbi Doolin. Gabbi Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, a small town with a population of just over 4,000. In Scottsville, most people know each other or know someone in every family. Like many small towns, here there are very few types of entertainment. Locals primarily focused on school sports, especially football. The local school had good fields for football, baseball, and tennis, where they frequently held games and competitions. Participating in these activities has become a tradition for locals, especially when their children participate. Gabbi's family was typical. Her parents had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The oldest son was a member of the school football team, while Gabbi participated in cheerleading. In November 2015, when Gabbi was 7 years old, their town was preparing for the biggest football game of the year. Their school team was about to compete against a team from another county. And everyone was excited for this contest. Although Gabbi's older brother played on the team, but she liked playing with other children more than playing games. Gabbi's parents originally intended to leave her at home with their youngest son, cared for by a relative. However, Gabbi convinced them to let her join them. On the evening of November 14th, they went to the school field for a game. In addition to local people, many people from a neighboring county came to support their team. Once they arrived at the stadium, Gabbi saw her friends and asked her mom if she could play with them. Her mom agreed but reminded her to stay on school grounds and stick with the other kids. After that, her mom went to the bleachers, while she ran off to meet her friends. Gabbi ran back and forth to her mom a few times. After that, she ran away to play again. At one point, she visited her dad, who was in the announcement room, and asked him for some money to buy snacks at the concession stand, then she running off again. Minutes later, Gabbi's friends approached her mom in the bleachers, looking worried. Her mom noticed Gabbi was not with them and asked what was wrong. The girls explained they had decided to play hide and seek, and Gabbi was to find them. They had hidden in the restroom, but time passed, and Gabbi never found them. Thinking they had won, the girls left their hiding spot to find Gabbi, but she was nowhere to be seen. They called her name and checked all the places they had been playing earlier, but Gabbi had seemingly disappeared. They then remembered that Gabbi might have gone to the bleachers to find her mom, so they rushed there. Gabbi's mother panicked when she discovered her daughter was missing and quickly informed her husband. He hurried off to search the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, the mother headed to the concession stand, where Gabbi had wanted to buy snacks, to continue her search. While searching, the parents Gabbi's encountered friends and shared the news about their daughter's disappearance. Concerned, their friends joined in a search for Gabbi. They thoroughly searched the area around the stadium but found no trace of Gabbi. Returning to the stadium, the parents Gabbi's made an announcement over the loudspeakers in hopes that she would hear it, but there was still no sign of her. As the game paused and spectators returned to their seats, they continued to ask people if they had seen Gabbi, and some offered to help search as well. They went out again to search the area around the stadium and asked the staff to turn on flashlights around the baseball field, which led to a small forest. They walked through the forest but still couldn't find Gabbi. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed since she disappeared, and the parents decided to call the police. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, listened to the accounts from the parents and Gabbi's friends, and they began their search. The local police department had little experience with serious cases like this, as child disappearances were rare in their small town. The officers immediately considered the worst-case scenario, that Gabbi may have been abducted or harmed. The officers encountered a pressing issue. The suspected kidnapper was likely at the stadium, where a game was about to conclude. Realizing they had limited time before fans started leaving, which may include suspects, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. Police kept watch at all exits to stop anyone from fleeing. They decided not to inform people about the situation, to avoid causing panic, so as not to hinder their search. If people became aware that a kidnapper of a 7-year-old girl might be nearby, it could lead to chaos. Meanwhile, state police arrived at the school and began searching the surrounding area. They moved toward the baseball field and entered the woods. Deeper into the trees, they discovered a small creek where they found the body of a girl, later identified as Gabbi. They called for an ambulance to transport her body to the medical examiner. A preliminary examination indicated asphyxiation due to visible marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of Gabbi's clothes were also missing, making the police suspect that she had been sexually assaulted. Gabbi's mother saw an ambulance near the woods and immediately thought that her daughter had been found in need of medical attention. She rushed to the scene, but was stopped by the police, who didn't want her to witness the disturbing scene they were dealing with. The police investigation had quickly turned into a murder case, so they decided to relocate everyone from the stadium to the school gym. The investigators suspected that the killer might be among the group, and they needed to identify the perpetrator as soon as possible. The investigators then informed Gabbi's parents about the likely circumstances of her death. They inquired if the parents had any suspicions about the person responsible for this heinous act. Specifically, they inquired if anyone had made threats against the family or if the parents had noticed anything unusual. However, Gabbi's parents stated they had no idea who could be behind this act. Then, detectives interviewing Gabbi's friends to see if they had noticed anything unusual that evening. They asked if anyone had been following or watching them, but the girls didn't remember anything suspicious. Detectives also brought Gabbi's friends to the gym and asked them to carefully observe the people present, hoping to trigger their memory. Unfortunately, this effort did not yield any significant leads. The lead detective persisted in his belief that Gabbi's friends may have unknowingly seen the kidnapper. He suspected that they might have been hesitant to point him out due to fear. To aid their recall, he encouraged them to remember every detail from that evening. Eventually, one of Gabbi's friends mentioned that when she hid from Gabbi in the restroom, she saw a man near the door. Although the girl's memory of the man's appearance was limited, she recalled that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police spoke to the ticket vendor, who confirmed seeing a man with a denim jacket draped. The vendor found this person's behavior unusual and suspected he was intoxicated. Although this new information helped, the police still couldn't identify the man. The police started questioning the people who had been at the game. As they did, it became clear why they were all being held there. They grew concerned, particularly for the safety of their children. Despite their fear, they cooperated with the police and answered their questions. To further investigate, the police cross-referenced the names of men present in the gym against a sex offenders registry, but found no matches. They also checked on sex offenders who had lived near the school, verifying their whereabouts at the time of the incident, but all of them had alibis. None of them had been near the school at the time of the incident. Several witnesses reported that they saw a man named Timothy Madden, he acting strangely near the women's restroom during the game. As a local resident, many people were familiar with him, but they stated that his behavior that evening seemed suspicious. According to these witnesses, Madden was wearing a denim jacket, which matches the description provided by one of Gabbi's friends who also saw a man near the restroom. A witness who was a distant relative of Timothy reported that during the game, Timothy seemed distracted. Despite his younger son playing on the field, Timothy, who normally showed great interest in his son's sports activities, wasn't paying attention. Several other witnesses also expressed concerns about Timothy's unusual behavior, leading investigators to interrogate him. As night fell, many people had been released from the school. Before speaking with Timothy, investigators sought the local sheriff's opinion. The sheriff, who had known Timothy, doubted he was capable of committing such a crime. Timothy lived with his wife and 5 children. When police went to speak with him, they knocked on his door, and he answered. The officers asked if he knew the reason for their visit, and Timothy stated he was aware of Gabbi's murder, but had no involvement in it. The detectives then used a tactic to gather more information. They asked Timothy if he could explain why several eyewitnesses claimed to have recorded him talking to Gabbi shortly before her murder, through videos they supposedly provided. However, the detectives had fabricated this information. Their intention was to provoke Timothy into revealing his guilt or new information if he was involved in the crime. Timothy initially claimed he had no knowledge of the events, but he quickly changed his story. He admitted to speaking to Gabbi near the stadium that evening. According to Timothy, he had stepped outside to smoke when several girls ran by him. Shortly after, Gabbi approached and asked if he had seen her friends, explaining they were playing hide-and-seek and she couldn't find them. Timothy directed her towards their location, and she ran off. The detectives found Timothy's rapid change in story suspicious. Furthermore, his account indicated that he had spoken to Gabbi just minutes before her disappearance. Notably, at the time when they met near the stadium, there were no witnesses present, which could have provided Timothy with an opportunity to commit the crime. The detectives then inquired if Timothy could provide a reasonable explanation if his DNA was found on Gabbi's body. He replied calmly that he had none. They also requested a DNA sample from Timothy and the clothing he wore at the stadium. Timothy agreed to both requests. However, when handing over his clothing to the police, they discovered suspicious stains on the pants, denim jacket, and underwear that resembled blood. When questioned about the stains, Timothy insisted they were just dirt and denied any wrongdoing. However, the police were skeptical and decided to wait for the DNA analysis results to proceed with an arrest. After several days, the forensic pathologist completed the examination of the victim's body, confirming that Gabbi's cause of death was manual strangulation. The pathologist also determined that she had been brutally assaulted. A biological sample of the perpetrator was extracted and sent to the laboratory for further analysis. The day after the murder, something unexpected happened. An anonymous letter arrived at the police station, claiming a suspicious person had been seen at the game. The letter provided a detailed description of the person's car, including the make and license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly track down the vehicle's owner, who was a student living about 30 minutes from Scottsville. When questioned by the police, the student denied attending the game and knowing about the murder. He claimed to have been at work that evening, and the police were able to verify his alibi. As a result, he was removed from the list of suspects. Despite this, the person who wrote the anonymous letter was never identified. It is unclear whether the letter was intended as a trap or a cruel joke, but it is clear that the student was innocent. Police quickly received additional clues. Several people reported suspicious behavior by a 16-year-old local boy. He had given conflicting accounts of his whereabouts on the day of the game, claiming both to have been there and not to have attended. He also mentioned seeing girls playing hide and seek. The detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. However, what they found even more alarming was that the boy had threatened his father with a knife just 2 weeks before the murder. The police wanted to question the boy further but needed his parents to be present. However, his mother refused to cooperate and wouldn't provide a DNA sample, leaving the police without any concrete evidence. As news of the police investigation into the Timothy family spread, rumors began circulating in the small town of Scottsville. Some speculated that one of Timothy's older sons could be a suspect, while others suspected Timothy himself. Gabbi's parents were shocked to hear these rumors, especially since they had known Timothy Madden since childhood and were close to his family. Their children played on the same sports teams, and they would often sit together at games. Given their long-standing friendship, Gabbi's parents found it difficult to imagine that anyone from their social circle could be connected to the murder. Following the spread of rumors in town, another incident occurred. The 20-year-old eldest son of the Timothy family began sending text messages to the police. He using profanity and issuing threats, insisting police stop bothering his family. He then was promptly arrested for making these threats. Further investigation revealed that there was an outstanding arrest warrant for him in another town, related to allegations of assaulting a minor. During questioning, the young man attributed his behavior to frustration over the accusations against his family. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming he was at his cousin's house in a neighboring town on the evening in question. He consented to providing a DNA sample, which was then sent to the lab for analysis. On November 20th, 6 days after Gabbi's murder, her funeral was held, drawing hundreds of mourners from Scottsville and surrounding towns. Everyone came together to support Gabbi's parents, donating to help cover the funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the lab finished analyzing the DNA evidence, comparing it to samples from Timothy and his son. The results were conclusive. The semen on Gabbi's body matched Timothy Madden's DNA, and the blood on his clothes matched Gabbi's DNA. Detectives attended the funeral and discreetly informed Gabbi's parents about this. At the same time, police officers arrived at Timothy's house and took him into custody. However, Timothy still maintains that he is innocent. He said the blood on his clothes was his own, the result of a scratch from a fence. This contradicted his initial testimony to police, in which he had claimed the stain was mud. With the DNA evidence in hand, the prosecution took the case to court, seeking the death penalty. During trial preparation, Timothy's lawyer maintained his client's innocence. He raised concerns about the reliability of the evidence, citing inconsistencies in the timeline. Specifically, the lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium filming a game at the time of the murder. However, Timothy himself had previously told police that he saw Gabbi around the same time. The lawyer highlighted that Gabbi's body was discovered in a creek, yet when Timothy returned to the stadium, his clothes were dry. Additionally, Timothy's mother, who resided with him, reported that when Timothy came home, he was wearing clean clothes, didn't look troubled, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the discovery of Timothy's semen on Gabbi's body made all of the defense's arguments meaningless. This evidence firmly established that Timothy was involved in the case. According to police, his account of that evening contained some truth. It is possible that Timothy did leave the stadium during the game and encountered Gabbi, who was searching for her friends. Given that Timothy was the father of one of Gabbi's friends, she would have been familiar with him. Gabbi may have approached Timothy to ask about the whereabouts of the other girls. At this point, Timothy might have concocted a plan, telling Gabbi that the girls had gone into the woods behind the baseball field and offered to take her there. Once they were far enough from the school, he could have assaulted and killed her, then go back to the match. The wait for Timothy's trial had been ongoing for 4 years, causing distress for Gabbi's family. They were anxious for justice to be served and for the person responsible for the murder to be held accountable. However, the case was slowed down due to many administrative procedures, leaving the family frustrated and having to wait for many years. In 2019, the prosecution and defense started negotiating a plea deal. The prosecution proposed waiving the death penalty if Timothy pleaded guilty and accepted a life sentence. Gabbi's parents supported this proposal, as the prolonged wait for the trial was taking a toll on them. They also wanted to avoid the emotional pain of attending multiple hearings. Although Timothy had consistently maintained his innocence, he eventually agreed to the plea deal and confessed. However, the terms of the agreement did not require him to disclose the details of his actions. He only had to admit his guilt. This was unsatisfactory for Gabbi's family, as they wanted the perpetrator to take full responsibility for his crimes and provide a complete account of what happened to their daughter. The court hearing became heated, Gabbi's father yelling at Timothy and Timothy's relatives shouting at Gabbi's family. The judge was forced to intervene, calling a break and separating the parties. Ultimately, Timothy was sentenced to life in a maximum security prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of McDermott family. Mark McDermott was born in the early 1960s in Australia. But we know that Mark was the eldest of 5 siblings. Known family members include his father, Bruce McDermott, and 2 sisters, Tracy and Nicole, with Nicole being the youngest. According to those close to him, Mark was not only a successful businessman but also a kind and easygoing person. Nicole described her brother as a wonderful person who avoided causing harm to others. Information about Mark's life is limited, especially regarding his adult life. However, we do know for sure that he traveled to the southern United States, although the reasons and circumstances are unclear. It was there that he met Johanna Dunn, a single mother raising a 4-year-old son, Donald Dunn. Donald Wayne Dunn was born in the early 1990s in West Virginia and lived there with his mother's family all his life. His grandparents played a major role in Donald's early upbringing, as they cared for him most of the time. Donald's mother, Johanna, was a single working mother who found raising a child difficult, so she asked her grandparents to help. On the rare occasions when Johanna and Donald were home together, she would often entertain him with video games or television. This reflected Johanna's difficulty in giving her son her full attention, although they tried to make time for each other. Their lives changed when Mark came along. Johanna and Mark quickly fell in love and married. Johanna took her husband's last name, and the 3 of them moved to West Virginia, becoming a happy family. From the beginning, Mark and Donald were very close, as if they were related by blood. Their relatives, including Mark's sister and father, confirmed that Mark treated Donald like his own son, and Donald also considered Mark his only father. The relationship between Donald and Mark was very close, which was evident when Donald was young. During the difficult times when Mark and Johanna were temporarily separated, Donald was still determined to stay with Mark instead of his mother. At the same time, the family faced a great challenge when Johanna was diagnosed with cancer. However, thanks to their support and solidarity, they overcame these difficulties together. Mark always took good care of his stepson, ensuring that Donald had a comfortable and fulfilling life. Although Donald is a simple man and does not ask for much, he is very grateful for the peaceful and luxurious life his stepfather has created for him. When Donald graduated from high school in 2008, Mark covered the entire cost of his college education. Donald attended Rio Salado College for the first 2 years, then transferred to Marshall University in 2010. Throughout this time, Mark continued to financially support Donald's education. Donald lives with his girlfriend and her family. He and his girlfriend have been in love since they were 15 years old. Despite this, Mark and Johanna have always been very supportive of Donald. They not only pay for Donald's tuition but also support him financially in many other ways. Specifically, they cover the costs of Donald's clothes, car insurance, daily living expenses, and food. Donald dedicates all his time and effort to studying. As a responsible and diligent student, he always strictly follows his daily study schedule. He often refuses or cancels plans to meet friends and relatives, citing the need to complete assignments or study for exams. Donald prioritizes studying above everything else in his life. During his 5 years in college, he always tried his best to graduate on time and not fall behind in any semester. May 25, 2013, a Saturday, was supposed to be the big day when he received his university diploma. However, instead of being the joyous occasion he had planned, the day turned into a heartbreaking moment that would change his life forever. While the McDermott family was preparing for Donald's graduation, an emergency call was placed from their home to 911. Johanna called the police and admitted that she had shot her husband. She insisted that the act was intentional, not an accident. Police quickly arrived at the McDermott family home. Sergeant Greg Kean of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office was one of the first law enforcement officers to arrive. When he got to the scene, he noticed that Johanna appeared to be in a state of severe shock. As he entered the home, he found Mark lying motionless on the couch in the living room. He appeared to have been reading a book when he died. Initially, Sergeant Greg noticed that he had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. However, when investigators moved the body, they discovered a 3rd wound behind the shoulder. The medical examiner at the scene confirmed that the cause of death was head injuries, but it was possible that Mark did not die immediately after being shot. There was a lot of blood at the crime scene, suggesting that Mark had been losing blood over time before his death. According to initial reports, Donald was taking a shower to prepare for his important day. The sound of the running water from the shower drowned out the gunshots. So Donald did not hear Johanna shoot her stepfather. It was only when Donald emerged from the shower that he discovered Mark's body in the living room. On the dining room table was a pistol and a letter, presumably written by Johanna to Donald's son. In the letter, Johanna expressed her grief and explained that her marriage had become unbearable. She could no longer live with a man she did not love anymore. Johanna also apologized for leaving Donald's life when he was still a minor. At that time, Johanna and Donald were taken to the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office in a private car, where a police officer took their statements. Since Johanna was the one who called the police, the incident was initially treated as a serious case of domestic violence. In the call to the dispatcher, Johanna stated that after an argument with Mark, she had shot him in the head with a pistol in a fit of rage without realizing what she was doing. However, she later changed her story, denying what she had said before. This caught the police by surprise and forced them to adjust the entire investigation. After getting into the police car, Johanna suddenly revealed the truth that it was not her, but her son Donald who killed Mark. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The story was actually much more complicated than what the investigators initially thought. Johanna entered the interrogation room and met with Captain James Barr from the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office. She detailed the events that had occurred on May 25, 2013. According to Johanna, her son was scheduled to attend his graduation that morning. Before that, she had gone out to run some errands and buy groceries. Johanna had just arrived home and was about to get out of the car when Donald approached her. He asked his mother to close her eyes and follow him into the house, saying that there was a surprise. Trusting her son, Johanna complied and walked into the dining room. Donald told his mother to sit down. Suddenly, Johanna heard a distinct clicking sound. When she opened her eyes to look at her son, she was horrified to see Donald pointing his own pistol at her. The gun failed to fire, and Johanna panicked, trying to wrestle it from her son. She tried to calm down, think clearly, and make a plan to save herself from becoming Donald's victim. Seeing Mark's body, she quickly told her son that she would call 911 and take the blame for him. Although Donald was initially skeptical, he eventually agreed to his mother's plan. During her interrogation, Johanna explained why she called 911 and incriminated herself. She did so to protect herself from Donald, even though she knew she would go to jail. She believed that if she did not, Donald would kill her. Johanna expressed shock that her son would point the gun at her head and pull the trigger, something she never thought would happen in her 23 years of being a mother. The gun belonged to her. She explained that the reason the gun did not fire was probably because Donald had pulled the trigger of the semi-automatic gun too far, preventing it from firing normally. Captain James thought Johanna's story was very plausible. From the moment he met Donald, he felt something was wrong. He noticed that Donald, a 23-year-old young man, was too calm for this serious situation. His face always remained neutral, showing no emotion. Therefore, he decided to put him in a separate interrogation room, away from his mother. From the beginning of the interrogation, Donald denied any involvement in his stepfather's death. However, after being informed of Johanna's testimony, his denial quickly collapsed. James did not need to use any threats or pressure to force Donald to confess. Instead, he voluntarily recounted the whole incident, revealing every detail of the case. The story Donald told was almost unbelievable. This story begins after Donald completed his first year of college. It was clear that his academic performance was not good, and due to his low grades, he decided to drop out of school. Donald shared that at first, his courses were easy and he could get good grades just by showing up to class on time. As the semester progressed, he encountered more and more difficulties in his studies. He felt that he was not capable of continuing. Instead of admitting the truth, he decided to lie to Mark and Johanna. Not only were his close friends deceived, but his girlfriend and her family were also unaware of his true situation. According to Rachel Rush, Donald's girlfriend's sister, he created a false impression that he was studying. Donald maintained a student-like schedule, leaving and returning home at fixed times. He spent most of the day in his room and asked not to be disturbed, citing the need to focus on homework or studying for exams. To create a more convincing appearance, Donald even falsified his transcripts. This was a deliberate deception that lasted for 4.5 years. No one in Donald's life realized that he was lying to them. Donald's family trusted him completely during the time he pretended to be a student. Johanna and Mark had no idea that their son had abused the financial and emotional support they had given him all this time. Donald admitted that he had no intention of deceiving his family at first, but as time went on, it became more and more difficult to confess the truth. The main reason he could not tell the truth was because he was afraid that Mark and Johanna would stop paying for all his expenses. Although he appeared to not care much about material things like cars or expensive clothes, he did not want to give up his current lifestyle. He was well aware that he would lose a lot if his parents found out the truth. For a long time, Donald had been meticulously planning to escape all trouble. From the beginning, he had planned to kill his parents to avoid suspicion. Donald planned to leave a note similar to the one found on the dining table along with the pistol. He believed that when the police read the note, they would conclude that this was the crime of an unhappy woman who saw no other way but to kill herself. Donald told Captain James that on May 25th, he had secretly taken Johanna's pistol and kept it with him all day, pretending to be preparing for his graduation ceremony. Before carrying out the rest of his plan, he decided to go to the supermarket to have his image recorded by the surveillance cameras, in order to use this evidence to prove his innocence. Before the murder, Donald had begun to show an interest in shooting practice. Although his best friend Alex Willis found this strange, Alex did not suspect anything as he did not think Donald would want to use a gun to attack someone. Donald's considerations and conclusions left everyone who heard them afterwards confused. James shared that this young man admitted that he had even planned the emotions he would express on his face when the police arrived at the scene. He also thought about how he would support himself after losing the steady income provided by Mark, and decided to take advantage of the sympathy of his loved ones as long as he could. While his family supported him, he decided to take up sports to improve his health and fitness. If he had no other choice, he would consider joining the police force or the army. When considering the possibility of his plan succeeding, Donald realized that it would be easier to kill his mother and stepfather than to admit that he had been lying to them for nearly 5 years. In April 2016, the West Virginia Supreme Court released a legal opinion. According to the opinion, Donald was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder 1 month after his arrest in June 2013. Even before the trial, Donald and his legal team sought to delay the trial. A few weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, the defendant, Donald Dunn, who had been held in solitary confinement, underwent surgery on his right hand. His attorneys used the surgery as a reason to request a delay, arguing that during the initial hearings, he would be under the influence of strong painkillers. To decide this issue, the court first requested his medical records. However, this request was denied on the grounds that, at the preliminary hearing, there was no evidence that Donald was partially incapacitated due to the use of painkillers. Therefore, the court determined that he was competent to attend trial and approved the continuation of the scheduled trial. The trial took place in August 2014, over a year after Mark's death. It was presided over by Judge John Hutchinson, with David White representing Donald and Christine Keller from the Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office. Mark's two sisters, along with one of their nieces, traveled more than 15,000 kilometers from Australia to attend the trial of the man they had considered a family member for nearly 20 years. Although there were no details from witness testimony or evidence presented to the jury, and no photographs or video footage, the defense wanted to include in their opening argument that Donald was under the influence of illegal drugs at the time of the crime. However, there was no evidence that this had ever been mentioned before or confirmed by any toxicology tests. On August 14, 2014, Donald Dunn was convicted of the murder of his stepfather, Mark McDermott, the attempted murder of his mother, Johanna McDermott, and the use of a firearm. About a month later, on September 5 of the same year, Judge John Hutchinson sentenced Donald Dunn to life in prison without parole for the murder of his stepfather and 15 years in prison for the attempted murder of his mother. After the verdict was announced, Johanna read an emotional letter to the court. In the letter, Donald's mother mentioned that something unfortunate had happened in her son's life. This could have been due to the decline in health of his grandparents, the pressure she put on him to go to college, or his exposure to violent video games at a very young age. She expressed her disapproval of the way her son was perceived by the public and stated that she did not agree with his sentence. However, Judge John explained that Johanna's objections did not affect his decision. He felt that the sentence he imposed was the only way to restore justice in an unjust situation. He sympathized with the defendant's mother, who, despite the circumstances, wanted to protect her son from the consequences of his actions. After the verdict, Mark's sister and father still could not understand how Donald could take the life of a man who had raised him as his own son for 19 years. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Michelle Avila. Michelle Yvette Missy Avila was born on February 8, 1968, in Arleta, Los Angeles. She grew up in a family with a mother and 3 brothers. Michelle attended San Fernando High School with 2 of her close friends, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. However, their friendship began to deteriorate when they entered high school. Thanks to her beauty and popularity, Michelle attracted a lot of attention from her peers, especially boys. Michelle's prominence made Karen and Laura increasingly jealous. Afterwards, a false rumor spread that Michelle had been involved with several guys who were already in relationships. This malicious gossip incited violence against Michelle outside of school. The assault was so serious that when she returned home, her parents immediately charged the ringleader of the assault, Sonia Bond, and took her to court. Michelle was scheduled to testify against Sonia in court on October 8, 1985, but unfortunately, she never got the chance. This was due to a series of events that took place in early September. A rumor that had been circulating for a year, accusing Michelle of having had an affair with her friend's boyfriend, resurfaced and caused a rift between Michelle and her best friends, Karen and Laura. The tension started when Michelle started dating a guy named Randy during their senior year. However, Michelle ended the relationship after only a month due to Randy's constant partying. Not long after the breakup, Karen started dating Randy and the two moved in together. Despite his relationship with Karen, Randy still had feelings for Michelle, which Karen discovered when she saw him flirting with Michelle. Michelle rejected Randy's advances, making it clear that she was not interested in rekindling their affair. Michelle advised Karen to reconsider her relationship with Randy and find someone better. Karen was furious, and Karen and Laura decided to confront Michelle at a neighboring park, causing rumors to spread once again. Michelle tried to reason with Karen and Laura, explaining that she would never betray their trust and that these were just false rumors from the previous year. Witnesses said Karen yelled at Michelle, threatened her with a broken beer bottle, pushed her to the ground, and slapped her before leaving with Laura. This encounter occurred just 10 days before Michelle was murdered. After the incident, Laura apologized to Michelle, and they decided to put their conflicts aside. However, Karen did not apologize to Michelle until October 1st, when she finally apologized for her reaction to Michelle. Michelle was grateful for the apology because she missed her friends so much. The three friends then made plans to meet at Stonehurst Park later that day. On October 1st, 1985, Michelle told her mother that she was going out with friends and was allowed to go on the condition that she be home by 6 p.m. Michelle waited outside for Laura to pick her up. When Laura arrived, they drove around a bit before arriving at Stonehurst Park, where they parked and waited for Karen to arrive. A few minutes had passed, and Karen had driven into the parking lot with another friend named Eva, who had been sitting in the passenger seat. As soon as Karen had arrived, she had driven her car very close to Laura's car and had rolled down the window. She had started shouting at Laura, who had rolled down her window and yelled back. Michelle and Eva had watched in amazement as their friends had angrily insulted each other, but Michelle had had no idea what the argument had been about. The situation had quickly escalated as Karen had backed away and sped off, with Laura following closely behind. They had driven recklessly for 45 minutes, heading north of the city and into the mountains. Michelle and Eva had begged them to calm down and stop, but Karen and Laura had been too angry to listen. Finally, they had turned into a parking lot that had led to a forest. Laura and Karen had gotten out of the car and continued their argument. Michelle had gotten out of the car hoping to intervene and stop the fight. However, as soon as they had stepped outside, Laura and Karen had suddenly stopped arguing and had turned their attention to Michelle. They had rushed towards her, leaving Michelle wondering what would happen next. Michelle had tried to get in the car, but Karen and Laura had been standing too close, leaving her trapped. They hadn't fought physically with her, but they had been angry with Michelle. Karen and Laura had told Michelle that they had staged the entire drama to lure her into the woods, where they could confront her. Karen and Laura had accused Michelle of sleeping with their boyfriends and had revealed that it had been they who had started the rumors. Karen and Laura had shouted at Michelle, refusing to listen to her explanation. When Michelle had become confused, Karen and Laura had grabbed her, pulled her out of the car, and had forced her to follow a nearby trail into the woods. Michelle had been much smaller than the other two girls, which had left her defenseless against Karen and Laura, who had continued to push her further down. Eva had remained in the car during the initial altercation, but had eventually gotten out and followed the group at a distance. She hadn't participated in the events that had taken place in the forest and hadn't been sure why she had been there. The group had continued into the woods, out of sight from the parking lot. When they had gone far enough, Laura had stopped and turned back to Michelle, who had been crying fearfully. Laura had then punched Michelle in the face. Karen had quickly joined in, and within seconds, Michelle had been on the ground, beaten and trampled. The attack had temporarily stopped when Laura had pulled out her knife. Grabbing Michelle's hair, she had begun cutting out sections of hair. Karen had wanted to participate, so she had started pulling Michelle's hair with her hands because she hadn't had a knife. Meanwhile, Eva had watched what had happened without doing anything to intervene. After cutting and pulling Michelle's hair, Laura and Karen had used rope to tie Michelle's hands behind her back and gagged her. A nearby river had caught Laura's attention, and she had stepped into the shallow water, smiling tauntingly at Michelle and daring her to enter. When Michelle hadn't moved, Karen had helped her up, forced her toward the river, and pushed her. Michelle had fallen down the hill, her face hitting the ground, rolling towards the river with her hands tied. Laura and Karen grabbed the girl and pulled her into the water. Eva had witnessed this and had run back up the driveway. However, when she had approached the cars, she had discovered they were locked. Since Eva had been too far away to get help from others, she had started walking back down the trail. But when she had heard a terrifying scream, she had stopped walking, turned around, and had run back to her car. There, Eva had lain on the ground in the fetal position and had waited about an hour until she had seen Laura and Karen return, soaking wet and laughing. But to her alarm, they had no longer been with Michelle. Then they left the forest, got in the car with Eva, and returned home. After the incident, for hours later, Laura even called Michelle's mother and asked after her. Laura talked to Michelle's mother, Irene Avila, and made up a story about dropping Michelle off with 3 boys in a blue Camaro after getting gas. Laura claimed that when she returned, Michelle and the 3 boys were gone. On October 4, 1985, Michelle's body was found face down in a stream in Big Tahunva Canyon, in Angeles National Forest, by a group of hikers. They then informed the police. Upon arriving at the scene, police found that Michelle had been drowned in 8 inches of water. Her long hair was cut off and there was a 4-foot-long piece of wood lying on top of her. Police found cigarettes, beer, and men's overalls near where Michelle's body was discovered. Karen and Laura told Michelle's parents and detectives that before her disappearance, Michelle had been traveling with 3 men in a blue Camaro. This made the items around the scene seem more reasonable. This false information caused detectives to search for bogus men for 3 years. Irene Avila said she did not suspect Karen or Laura were involved in her daughter's death because they both attended Michelle's funeral. Laura sent the family a condolence card and $20. Meanwhile, Karen had been living with Michelle's family for a long time to show support and help catch the murderer. In reality, Karen just wanted to oversee the investigation and keep the detectives from suspecting her. She also slept in Michelle's bed and had dinner with her family many nights, while she herself had participated in Michelle's murder. Karen seemed haunted by the murder. She regularly visited Michelle's grave several times a week, covered her room's walls with photos of Michelle and newspaper clippings about the crime, and constantly visited the creek where Michelle's body was found. One time, Karen told Irene that she saw Michelle's ghost. Detectives had no leads and the case languished for 3 years. By July 26, 1988, Eva Carambolo, the girl who had unwittingly participated in Michelle's murder, finally decided to report everything to the police. She explained the rumors that had been circulating about Michelle, the disagreements between her, Laura, and Karen, their anger, their jealousy, and every detail of the murder she knew. It took Eva a long time to report the incident because she was threatened by Laura and Karen. They told her not to say anything about what she saw, and she feared they would kill her. Finally, in March 1990, Karen and Laura were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The jury did not believe the murder was premeditated, so they rejected the first-degree murder charge. After serving 21.5 years, Karen was released from prison on December 9, 2011. Laura was also released from prison in December 2012 after serving 22 years. Karen attempted to write a memoir about the murder and her life in prison. However, the book did not achieve the expected success. She also planned to make a film about her story but faced opposition from Avila's family. This incident prompted the state of California to pass Missy's Law, requiring organizations that help publish criminals' works to contact victims' families about those works. Missy's story has sparked much debate about the impact of bullying, the complexities of teenage relationships, and the importance of fostering an environment of empathy and kindness. Michelle Yvette, Missy Avila's legacy will be one of resilience and hope. We hope that her memory will inspire us all to stand up against bullying, support those affected by betrayal, and work towards a future where understanding and empathy prevail. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Turpin family. David Turpin was born on October 17, 1961, in Princeton, West Virginia, to Betty and James Turpin. David came from a devoutly religious family and had a relatively normal upbringing. During his high school years at Princeton High School, David participated in various activities, including Bible Club, Chess Club, Science Club, and a cappella choir. David enrolled at Virginia Tech University after graduating from high school to pursue a degree in electrical engineering in Blacksburg, Virginia. Thanks to his exceptional skills in computer engineering, David landed jobs at leading defense technology companies such as Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. Louise Turpin was born on May 24, 1968, in Princeton, West Virginia. She is the eldest of 6 children of Wayne Robinette, a preacher, and Phyllis Robinette, who worked at Walmart and sang in the church choir. The Robinette children's home environment was tense due to frequent conflicts between their parents, which led to harsh treatment. Louise and her sisters were sexually abused by a family member as children. This traumatic experience was a secret kept within the family. According to Louise's younger sister, Elizabeth, Louise played a protective, gentle, kind, and nurturing role. She comforted her siblings during their parents' violent conflicts and protected them from abusive relatives. At the age of 15, Louise met 22-year-old David Turpin at church. They kept their relationship a secret for fear of Louise's parents' reaction. However, when the truth was discovered, Louise's mother Phyllis eventually accepted their relationship, partly because David came from a devout Christian family and Louise convinced her. David and Louise decided to keep their relationship a secret from her father, Wayne, knowing that he would be furious if he found out. In January 1985, 23-year-old David visited Louise's school, Princeton High School, where he had graduated 5 years earlier. He convinced the staff to let him take Louise out of class, and she left willingly with him. They began their journey south, planning to elope. When Louise's parents discovered she was missing, they called the police. Before the police could catch up with them, the couple headed to Texas, where they planned to secretly marry. However, when they were stopped, they agreed to return to West Virginia. When they returned home, Wayne and Phyllis's reactions were surprisingly calm. Initially, Wayne was angry with Phyllis for allowing their daughter, Louise, to date David. However, when he saw how much they loved each other, he realized that it would be difficult to separate them. So Wayne agreed to let them marry on February 11, 1985, in a small ceremony in Petersburg, Virginia. 2 years later, Louise's parents divorced and Louise's father, Wayne, took a job as the chief deputy assessor of Mercer County. After marrying David, Louise began to live more independently and freely. Louise was happy with her new life. In 1988, Louise gave birth to her first daughter, and 18 months later, their second child was born. David was then transferred to General Dynamics, and his family moved to Fort Worth, Texas. They settled in a modern neighborhood called Meadow Creek. Louise's family lived a lavish lifestyle thanks to David's high-paying job. Louise, eager to show off her family's newfound wealth, invited relatives from West Virginia to visit. Having grown up on a tight budget, Louise was happy to show off her current success. To make their visit comfortable, David and Louise paid all the expenses. The Louises welcomed a baby boy in 1991, bringing them even more joy. However, By 1992, the Louises were in debt. Despite their financial struggles, they continued to live a lavish lifestyle. In 1993, Louise became pregnant with her fourth child, a girl. In 1994, Louise's oldest daughter started first grade at Meadow Creek Elementary School. She looked neglected, with greasy, unkempt hair, dirty clothes, and poor hygiene. Her appearance made her the target of teasing by her classmates. In 1995, Louise's family welcomed a fifth child, a boy. Louise's family seemed carefree despite their financial difficulties and continued to splurge on luxuries, treating relatives to expensive meals. When Louise's younger sister Elizabeth joined them on their 1996 vacation in Fort Worth, they stopped at a casino in Louisiana on the way. While at the casino, Louise asked Elizabeth to babysit the children so she and David could gamble. They asked Elizabeth not to tell anyone about this, knowing that it was against their Christian values. During this visit, David and Louise's gambling led to losses. Tensions became apparent when David claimed that Louise had a serious gambling addiction and blamed Louise for their financial difficulties. While staying with Louise's family, Elizabeth was shocked by the family's disturbing behavior. David and Louise did not show much affection for their children and tightly controlled every aspect of their lives. Elizabeth was particularly concerned about David's behavior, as he often invaded Elizabeth's privacy by entering the bathroom while she was showering, making her feel uncomfortable and insecure. In May 1997, the Tuppins had their fifth child. By September of that year, concerns about their eldest daughter and the possible signs of sexual abuse began to grow. In 1998, the family had a sixth child. Although David had a well-paying job, the family's financial situation worsened due to their frequent gambling, which caused significant financial strain. In the spring of 1999, the eldest daughter dropped out of school, as did the other children. Louise and David announced that they were homeschooling their children. In late 1998, the bank foreclosed on the family's home in Fort Worth, so Louise and David moved to Rio Vista, Texas, a less populated area. The new home that Louise and David had in Rio Vista was in serious disrepair when they moved in. It was dirty, stained, and smelled bad. Before moving into the Rio Vista home, the Louises had their seventh child. Over the next 6 years, the family added 5 more children. Over time, the parents, David and Louise Turpin, became increasingly irresponsible and abusive. They physically harmed their children, beating, choking, and whipping them with belts, often for trivial reasons such as not letting them go to the bathroom. The children were also severely neglected in terms of personal hygiene, with some only bathing once a year. Despite purchasing nutritious food, David and Louise often withheld food from their children, forcing them to starve. The parents would tease their children by leaving uneaten meals in plain sight. Instead, the children were fed cheap frozen meals, resulting in severe malnutrition. This neglect was evident in the children's slow development, pale skin, and youthful appearances that did not match their actual ages. In 2004, Louise's family moved to a nicer trailer, leaving behind their old home in Rio Vista, which had become uninhabitable due to years of neglect, garbage accumulation, and rodent infestation. In 2008, Louise Turpin, then 40, had a shocking conversation with her sister Teresa. Louise revealed that she and her husband David had abandoned their Christian education and stopped attending church. Instead, they had become interested in Satanism and used Ouija boards. Louise also confessed that she and David had engaged in wife swapping, a lifestyle that involved having sex with other couples they met online. What was even more disturbing was that they often left their younger children at home, in the care of their older siblings, while they went out to meet strangers they had met online. This drastic change in Louise, who had always been caring and responsible, worried her older sister Teresa. Despite their financial struggles, Louise's family often went to Disneyland in matching outfits, taking lots of happy photos. Louise made sure to send these photos to her family and her parents. The only indication to Louise's family that the children were okay was through these photos, which showed them appearing happy despite being very thin. In 2014, Louise's family moved to Paris, California, about 20 miles north of Murrieta. By this time, the child abuse had reached an extremely violent level. David and Louise had tied their children to their beds with ropes. If the children tried to escape, the ropes were replaced with chains and locks. The children were locked in the room for around 20 hours a day, forced to endure the stench that permeated the air. In 2015, the family welcomed their 13th and final child. Soon after, the family traveled to Las Vegas to celebrate David and Louise's 30th wedding anniversary. Faced with the horrors of their living conditions, Louise and David's 17-year-old daughter made the brave decision to seek help by reporting the abuse to the police. She climbed out of the window and quickly called the police on the phone. During a tense 20-minute 911 call, she detailed the deplorable living conditions and the countless abuses she and her siblings endured. With photographs of their desperate situation as evidence, she waited for the police to arrive. When police arrived at the scene, they witnessed a horrifying scene: a severely malnourished girl who appeared to be about 10 years old. The girl led police to the front door, where they found Louise. Upon entering the home, police immediately smelled a strong stench that made it difficult to breathe. Despite the strong odor, police continued to investigate and made a horrifying discovery: 3 younger children chained to beds. The home was in a state of extreme disarray, with trash and dirt covering the floor because there was no toilet access. Police quickly took the younger children to Riverside University Medical Center for evaluation and care, while the older children were taken to Corona Regional Medical Center. David and Louise Turpin were arrested on January 14, 2018, for child abuse and torture. Within 4 days, they faced multiple charges. Each of them was charged with 12 counts of torture, 7 counts of abuse, 6 counts of child abuse and neglect, and 12 counts of false imprisonment. David Turpin also faces a separate charge of lewd conduct with a child under 14. Among their children, a 2-year-old child showed no obvious signs of abuse. In addition to being abused, the children were treated extremely cruelly by their parents. They suffered severe physical abuse that resulted in neurological damage. The children of Louise and David lacked basic life skills and knowledge. Although their parents, David and Louise Turpin, bought them toys, the children were not allowed to play with them. They were forced to stay up until the early hours of the morning, often until 4 or 5 a.m., and were not allowed to go to bed before that time. In 2018, the court took action against the Turpin parents. On January 24, the judge ordered that David and Louise have no contact with their children for 3 years, and that all contact be through their attorney. On June 21 of the same year, the court decided that there was enough evidence against David and Louise to proceed to trial. The trial concluded on February 22, 2019. On that day, David and Louise Turpin pleaded guilty to 14 counts including torture, abuse, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. During the trial, David and Louise had an emotional reunion with their children. The children appeared to have forgiven their parents and were affectionate toward David and Louise. Each expressed a wish for their parents to be well and shared that their lives were going well. David and Louise sincerely apologized for their past actions and expressed their deep love for their children, wishing them success in life. David and Louise were subsequently sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As of 2022, Louise, 53, and David, 60, are both eligible for parole in 2037. The severe abuse and neglect in their home shocked the community and beyond. The community came together to support the children, giving them hope and a new start in life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Mackenzie Lueck. Mackenzie Lueck was born on March 8, 1996, to Diana and Gregory Leck. Her father worked in healthcare logistics and administration, and her mother was a homemaker. Mackenzie grew up in El Segundo, a city in Los Angeles County, California, with an older brother and two younger brothers. Mackenzie attended El Segundo High School, where she was a member of the swim team and played water polo. Mackenzie was a hardworking student with a strong interest in art, music, and animals. Mackenzie attended the University of Utah, where she majored in kinesiology and nursing and was a member of the Alpha Kappa Omega sorority. While in college, Mackenzie shared her feminist views and switched her political orientation from major party to conservative third party. Mackenzie worked at a biotesting company in Salt Lake City. Mackenzie wanted to pursue a career in health sciences, discussed with her counselors plans to attend nursing or medical school, and expected to graduate in May 2020. The Mackenzie family lived a normal life until everything changed on June 17, 2019. On that day, Mackenzie returned to Salt Lake City, Utah, after her grandmother's funeral. She arrived at Salt Lake City International Airport around 2 a.m. and texted her mother, "Just landed and love you, Mom." When her mother Diana answered a few moments later, Diana discovered that Mackenzie's phone was turned off. Her father Gregory also tried to call Mackenzie but was routed to her voicemail, causing Mackenzie's family to become very concerned for her safety. On June 20th, Mackenzie's parents realized that her friends had not seen or heard from her either. Mackenzie's friends reported her missing to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Over the next 2 weeks, while Mackenzie's parents Diana, Gregory, and their 3 sons tried everything they could to find Mackenzie in California, Mackenzie's Alpha Kappa Omega sorority sisters organized search efforts in Utah. They even created a Facebook page called Find Mackenzie Lueck to attract national media attention to the case. As police searched for clues about Mackenzie, they discovered video footage of Mackenzie at the airport. She was then picked up by a Lyft driver and taken to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 13 miles away. Police checked Mackenzie's cell phone records, confirming that Mackenzie had been at the park. Police also discovered that Mackenzie had exchanged several text messages with a person named AAE, whom she had allegedly met on a dating website and planned to meet in person. Mackenzie's last text message to AAE was sent at 2:58 a.m. Cell phone records showed that both Mackenzie and AAE were at Hatch Park at the same time. Notably, at 2:59 a.m., Mackenzie's phone stopped transmitting data or location information, indicating that the phone had been turned off. Police tracked AAE's cell phone signal, which led them from the park to his home at 547 North 1000 West in a Fair Park neighborhood. Police found that AAE's cell phone was at his home at 3:07 a.m., just 7 to 8 minutes after he picked up Mackenzie from the park. Since AAE was the prime suspect in Mackenzie's disappearance, police decided to execute a search warrant at his home. During the search, police discovered a newly dug area in the backyard. Inside this area, they found burned human bones, muscle tissue, and charred personal items. In a nearby alley, police also discovered charred fabric and other items belonging to the victim. After the DNA from the bones matched the DNA profile of the items found, police identified the victim as Mackenzie. A neighbor reported a foul odor coming from a campfire in AAE's backyard, which was also fueled by gasoline, on June 17th and again on June 18th. This is where police found a shallow grave containing bones and tissue. Police impounded AAE's car after detecting a strong smell of gasoline and finding a red gas can in the trunk. They discovered that a can of gasoline had been purchased at a local store at 9 a.m. the day Mackenzie went missing. After arresting AAE, Police checked his cell phone records, which showed AAE's phone was in Logan Canyon, a location where he buried Mackenzie's body on June 25. Between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. police searched the area and found freshly disturbed soil in a wooded area near the main road, where they discovered a charred human body. On July 3, the medical examiner confirmed that the body was that of Mackenzie. Her hands had been bound behind her back with zip ties and rope. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull, and her death was classified as a homicide. On October 7, 2020, AAE pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree indignity to a human body in connection with Mackenzie's death. AAE was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 5 years for indecent assault on Mackenzie. AAE was also charged with kidnapping another woman in March 2018, whom AAE met on a dating website. In addition, AAE was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. These charges arose in August 2019 when police discovered child pornography on AAE's computer while investigating Mackenzie's death on July 2. The images reportedly showed children aged between 4 and 8. On October 1, 2020, AAE pleaded not guilty to these charges and the pornography charges were eventually dismissed. The tragic death of Mackenzie Lueck has had a profound impact on her family, friends, and the entire nation. Her cheerful personality, zest for life, and desire to make a positive impact were suddenly ended by a senseless act of violence. Mackenzie's story serves as an important reminder to always be cautious and safe, especially when using online dating services. Rest in peace, Mackenzie Lueck. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ronald Platt. July 28, 1996, began as a typical summer day in South England. Captain John Kopek and his son prepared for a fishing trip on their trawler, the Melkerry. Despite an unsuccessful day, they decided to try their luck in a spot known as the Roughs. They lowered the net into the water and waited. The two men felt a tug on the net, indicating that it was a large catch. However, when they pulled the net up, they were shocked to find that it was not a fish, but instead a badly decomposed body of a man. Captain Kopek immediately contacted the Brixham Coast Guard to report the discovery. The body was in a state of severe decomposition, indicating that it had been in the ocean for some time. Fish had nibbled at parts of the body, but despite the decomposition, the man's clothing was intact: a long-sleeved shirt, corduroy pants, and brown shoes. And there was no identification on the body. The only identifying features found on the dead man were a smudged tattoo on his right hand and a Rolex watch on his wrist. The body was taken to the medical examiner's office in Devon for further examination. It was estimated that the man was between 40 and 50 years old. A distinctive tattoo of a cluster of stars was found on his body. His only severe injury was a head wound, which was not fatal. This, combined with other bruising, suggested that he had been dragged along the seabed before being pulled into a boat. However, his lungs were filled with water, indicating that he had ultimately drowned. Police suspected that the man might have fallen overboard during a ferry crossing. The primary method for identifying him was through dental records, as they would be on file if he was a British citizen. However, this process would take some time. It was by chance that a mortuary technician noticed the man's watch, a Rolex Oyster self-winding model that was fully waterproof. The watch required regular motion to stay active and, as an original model, its ownership could potentially be traced. Police examined the watch found on the unidentified man and discovered a crucial clue. The calendar feature showed the date July 22, indicating that the man had likely drowned 2 days earlier, on July 20, 1996. Further examination revealed a serial number hidden between the wristband and the watch face. Police sent this number to Rolex to verify its authenticity and determine who owned the watch. The mystery surrounding the man, now known as Rolex Man, gained further clues a few weeks later after a records search identified the watch's owner as Ronald Joseph Platt. Ronald Joseph Platt was a 51-year-old TV repairman born in Calgary, Canada. His family later moved to Britain, where he grew up. Ronald remained unmarried and had served in the British Army as part of his national service. Those who knew him well described Ronald as a quiet and introverted man with a deep love for his native Canada. Ronald bought a Rolex watch in Germany in 1967, which became one of his most prized possessions. Ronald was so attached to the watch that, according to his former partners, he even wore it in the shower. Detective Constable Clenaghan from the Devon and Cornwall Police was assigned to the case from the start. The police investigation revealed that Ronald's last known address was in Essex, which was hundreds of miles away from where his body was found. Clenaghan contacted the Essex Police Department for assistance. Inspector Peter Redmond offered to visit the address to help with the investigation. When he visited the house, Peter found it vacant. Peter then contacted the owner and was told that the owner had moved out some time ago. However, Peter was provided with a letter of introduction that could assist in the investigation. The letter provided the address and contact details of a man named David Davis. Detective Peter called the number and got in touch with Davis. Before delivering the news, Peter asked Davis about his relationship with Ronald. Peter then informed Davis that a body had been found in Devon that was likely to be his friend. Davis agreed to meet with the police in Essex to discuss the matter further. When they met, Peter found Davis to be friendly and confident, but surprisingly calm, and asked very few questions about Ronald's death. Davis and Ronald had been friends for several years. Davis hadn't seen Ronald in over 3 months, and the last time they met, Davis had given him a loan to start an electrical business in France. Since then, Davis had assumed Ronald was living in France. During their conversation, Peter discovered that the symbol tattooed on Ronald's hand was a maple leaf, the national symbol of Canada. After providing all the necessary information, Davis left the station, assuring Detective Peter that he would send a photo of Ronald. The Essex police were then able to conclude their investigation, forming the theory that Ronald had fallen overboard and drowned in the channel. This theory aligned with Davis's account of the events, suggesting it was simply an unfortunate accident. With the Essex case over, Clenaghan had a problem on his end. He tried to contact Davis several times but was unsuccessful. Clenaghan then asked his colleague, Detective Peter of Essex, to help him contact Davis. Peter agreed and visited Davis at his home in Wooden Walter, a rural area of Essex with only 4 houses. They continued to describe Ronald to Peter, and he suddenly realized that the man they were describing was none other than the recently deceased Ronald Platt. This sudden revelation aroused Peter's suspicions, and he quickly contacted Clenaghan in Devon to share this surprising discovery. Police from both counties began to suspect that there was more to the case than initially appeared. Peter turned his attention to gathering information about the man impersonating his deceased friend. Peter visited an elderly couple, Frank and Aubrey, who shared with him the story of Ronald Platt, a young man with a wife and 2 young children. The couple mentioned that Ronald and his family frequently vacationed in Devon, where they owned a yacht, although they could not remember the name of the yacht. In Devon, Clenaghan reviewed the evidence and began reinterrogating old witnesses. His first was John Coppock, who revealed that when Ronald's body was found, a 10-pound anchor had also been pulled up in the net. John Coppock had given the anchor to a friend, who then passed it on to his mother to sell. Fortunately, the anchor had not yet been sold, allowing the police to retrieve it as evidence. Clenaghan's next step was to interview people who knew Ronald. He contacted Ronald's brother, Brian. Brian mentioned Elaine Boyes, Ronald's old friend of 13 years. Police then spoke with Elaine Boyes and discovered the connection between Ronald Platt and Davis. Elaine Boyes had met Davis in 1991 while working as a receptionist at a fine arts auction house in Harrogate, England. She recalled Davis as being tall, engaging, and charming. During their conversation, Davis mentioned his plans to move to Yorkshire, and the topic turned to job opportunities. Davis offered Elaine Boyes a job at his company, but she declined, explaining that she and Ronald were planning to move to Canada soon. Davis offered to help Elaine Boyes and Ronald save money to move to Canada. Elaine Boyes soon became Davis's executive assistant, and she soon introduced Ronald to Davis. The two men quickly became close friends. Elaine Boyes and Ronald were fascinated by Davis's lavish stories and impressed by his lavish lifestyle. Davis then offered them a business opportunity, proposing that they become directors of his company, the Cavendish Corporation. Although Elaine Boyes was initially hesitant, Davis explained that he wanted to keep a low profile due to his ex-wife, a wealthy doctor in New York, who allegedly still demanded alimony payments from him. By this point, Elaine Boyes and Ronald had developed a trust in Davis and believed that he was genuinely trying to protect her from his ex-wife. Davis sent both Elaine Boyes and Platt on business trips to Europe to negotiate deals on his behalf, gradually drawing them into his scheme. They transferred money to various offshore bank accounts without asking Davis what he intended to do with it, trusting him greatly because of his religious nature. On Christmas Day 1992, Davis invited Elaine Boyes and Ronald to visit Davis and his daughter, Noelle. After a sumptuous meal, they exchanged gifts. Elaine Boyes presented Davis with a card titled "The Greatest Gift Ever." In return, Davis gave the couple 2 plane tickets to Canada, provided they used them before February 1993. While Elaine Boyes was overwhelmed by the short notice, Ronald was overjoyed that his lifelong dream of returning to Canada had finally come true thanks to Davis. In preparation for their upcoming trip, Davis quickly made arrangements. To ensure he could effectively manage their affairs while they were away, he asked Elaine Boyes and Ronald to stamp their signatures and leave their driver's licenses with him in case they needed to prove their identity. Elaine Boyes and Ronald agreed, as they trusted Davis and were grateful for the new beginning he provided. Consequently, in February 1993, they left for Canada. However, the harsh winter conditions, lack of job opportunities, and resulting financial strain quickly put pressure on their relationship. Elaine Boyes and Ronald's relationship began to unravel due to increasing tension, ultimately causing them to drift apart. 5 months later, Elaine Boyes traveled to England to serve as a bridesmaid at her sister's wedding, with no intention of returning to Canada. Davis, who had become a family friend, was also invited to the wedding. During the event, he spoke with Elaine Boyes and asked about Ronald. Upon learning that Elaine Boyes had ended her relationship with Ronald and would not be returning to Canada, Davis was upset. He attempted to persuade Elaine Boyes to give Ronald another chance, but she refused. Davis packed up his life, said goodbye to Elaine Boyes, and left her with his mobile number. However, their friendship eventually dissolved, and the phone calls ceased. Ronald and Elaine Boyes had lost contact. Ever since Elaine Boyes moved away from Canada, she had not heard from Ronald, her former lover, or Davis, who had been her best friend. So when Davis suddenly contacted Elaine Boyes in late 1996, their conversation was somewhat awkward. They barely exchanged any important information, and surprisingly, Davis did not even mention Ronald's name. The conversation was brief, and they did not keep in touch after that. He failed to tell her that Ronald was dead. After the interview, Elaine Boyes suspected Davis was involved in Ronald's death. Police needed more concrete evidence. They started questioning witnesses. Following the wedding in Harrogate, Davis quickly moved to Devon with his family. There, he introduced himself as Ronald Platt. He also introduced his pregnant daughter as his wife, sometimes calling her Elaine Boyes. It was well known that Davis owned a yacht. Witnesses reported seeing Ronald and Davis together a month before Ronald's body was discovered. They claimed to have registered on Steam Packet as brothers, David and Ronald Platt. By this point, police knew Davis had lied about Ronald and his knowledge of Ronald's death. They needed one last piece of evidence to confirm their suspicions. Police analyzed mobile records and discovered that the calls made by Davis originated from the same area where the medical examiner believed Ronald had drowned. This led Essex police to plan a sting operation to arrest Davis on suspicion of Ronald's murder. The police were informed by Elaine Boyes that Davis had arranged to meet her for coffee at Chelmsford train station. The police arrived at the train station, however, Davis had escaped. Not giving up, Detective Peter decided to drive to the Davis family home. Pete called for backup. He speculated that Davis might be armed. As the police prepared to act, a taxi stopped at the entrance of the house, and Davis quickly escaped. The police promptly gave chase, and Davis was eventually caught and forced to surrender at gunpoint after Davis was arrested. Police took his fingerprints and submitted them to an international database. Albert Johnson Walker, a man on Interpol's wanted list and Canada's most wanted fugitive, was identified as the owner of the discovered prints. Albert Johnson's life story began in Canada. Born on August 9, 1945, in Hamilton, Ontario, Albert Johnson had big ambitions despite dropping out of high school. He had a charismatic presence. Albert Johnson met his ex-wife, Barbara MacDonald. They married in 1968. The couple started a family early and had 7 children, 3 girls and 4 boys. Albert Johnson was born in Paris, Ontario, where he and his wife Barbara started a freelance accounting business. The business grew rapidly, and within a decade, it had expanded to 6 locations with more than 30 employees. However, Albert Johnson deceived his friends and clients by secretly transferring their investments to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Over time, Albert Johnson's dishonesty wasn't the only problem he faced. His marriage began to fall apart due to his many affairs. Furthermore, those he had stolen money from began to become suspicious. With his empire on the brink of collapse, Albert Johnson decided to go on the run in 1990. Under the pretext of taking his 15-year-old daughter Sheena on a skiing trip to Europe, Albert Johnson escaped. Barbara discovered the incident and, concerned for her daughter's safety, reported her missing. The police tracked Albert Johnson to London, but lost track of him. Albert Johnson assumed a new identity, stolen from a client. He now went by the name Davis Wallace, and his daughter Sheena changed her name to Noelle. Although he evaded the police, the name Davis linked him back to his real identity. Davis Wallace needed a new identity, and his opportunity came when he met Ronald Platt. Ronald had a strong interest in Canada. Davis used this information to his advantage and created a new identity for himself. However, his plans began to fall apart in 1995 when Ronald contacted him, saying that Ronald was frustrated with life in Canada and was moving back to Essex to be closer to Davis. This development posed a problem for Davis, as having 2 Ronald Platts with the same birth date in the same area would have raised suspicion. To solve this problem, Davis came up with a plan. He bought a yacht, the Lady Jane, and took his family and Ronald to Totnes and Devon to celebrate the launch. During this trip, Davis and Ronald purchased a new 10-pound anchor. Davis invited Ronald to Devon for the weekend to go fishing and enjoy the coast. Davis took Ronald to his boat, the Lady Jane, far enough from shore to avoid detection. Once alone, Davis hit Ronald over the head with the anchor, knocking him unconscious. Davis then searched Ronald's pockets for identification and retrieved it. Davis tied the anchor to Ronald's waist to weigh him down and threw him into the water, intending to make it look like an accident. However, Davis made the mistake of leaving Ronald's Rolex watch on his wrist, which was later used to foil the carefully planned crime and bring Davis to justice. Davis's trial began in 1998. During the trial, some key evidence was presented to the court. The anchor found in the net along with Ronald Platt's body. Forensic experts analyzed the wound on Ronald's head and determined that it matched the shape of the anchor. Further investigation found traces of zinc on Ronald's belt, which matched the zinc found on the anchor. It was discovered that the anchor had been attached to Ronald's belt to drown him in the sea. A search of the yacht, Lady Jane, also uncovered significant evidence. Hairs matching Ronald's were found on a cushion, and his fingerprint was discovered on the bag that had been used to carry the anchor back to the yacht. Additionally, blood was found near the rails, providing further evidence to the case. Davis's hoarding habits cost him, as documents were seized and used to prove his sham business ventures and his trail of deception. Elaine Boy's testimony provided evidence that Davis would lose a lot if Ronald Platt returned to England. And his daughter Sheena testified that Davis had been out on a yacht and looked disheveled and agitated when he returned later that day of the murder. Sheena also spoke candidly about life with Davis and how she was constantly harassed by her father and feared for her own safety. Supreme Court Justice Neil Butterfield said Davis was an extremely intelligent and ruthless individual who posed a threat to others. He stated that Davis's crimes were carefully planned and executed with precision. As a result, Davis was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. In 2005, he was allowed to move to Canada to serve his sentence. 2 years later, at the age of 61, Davis was given an additional 4-year sentence to be served concurrently. In 2015, Davis applied for parole but withdrew it at the last minute. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Frank Spencer. Frank Spencer was born on November 10, 1965, in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. His father was Cyrus, and his mother was Melina Spencer. Since childhood, Frank loved active games and sports, which helped him maintain a healthy body and mind. When he was in high school, he demonstrated his special ability on the wrestling team and was recognized as an excellent member. Frank had a strong ambition in business and wanted to continue the family business. So, after graduating from high school in 1984, he attended a local university and completed his course in 1988. After his father passed away, Frank became the owner of Spencer's Auto Parts. The year 1997 marked an important event in Frank's life. It was the year he met Maria. The two of them were attracted to each other at first sight. Maria was known for her hot temper and daring personality, which intrigued Frank. Frank's friend Paul remembered that Frank had always liked strong and wild people. And he was a bit like that too. When Frank and Maria met, they had a great start. However, not everyone was happy with the relationship. Maria's parents, in particular, had mixed opinions about Frank. They believed that Frank was not the right man for their daughter. Furthermore, there were rumors that Frank's father had been involved in a gang and was even a hired criminal. Maria's father did not have a good impression of Frank. He even tried to prevent their marriage for a while. Frank's family was also not happy with Frank's choice. So, Frank and Maria decided to run away and rent a separate apartment to get away from their families. After a while, Frank's family and Maria's family were forced to accept their relationship. Family life gradually returned to normal. Maria and Frank got married and had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They then moved to a new house. During this time, Frank owned an auto parts business and sponsored race cars. He worked hard to provide his family with everything they needed. For Frank, his children were the top priority and driving force in his life. Maria initially tried to manage the housework and take care of the children. However, later, despite having a law degree, she became the coach of her daughter's soccer team. Her friends said that, unlike her husband, she was not really interested in the marriage. She seemed to be uninterested in work and family responsibilities. What worried her most was the financial issue. She liked to spend what Frank earned. Maria Spencer had a cold personality, especially towards the children. This caused many problems in her marriage. Her husband was frustrated with her selfishness and eccentricity and expected her to change when she became a mother. However, Maria remained her own person. In 2006, her husband decided to file for divorce because he could no longer stand her inappropriate behavior and constant scandals. He feared for the health of the children because of her unreasonable behavior. After the divorce, the relationship between the two became even more strained. A confrontation over custody was inevitable. Maria wanted to keep the children with her, but her husband did not trust her and believed that she could not take good care of them. However, not everyone agreed with her husband's views. For example, her husband's friend, Ron, believed that both parents were necessary for the children to develop normally. Frank's friend advised him to negotiate with Maria for custody of the children. However, Frank thought he knew better than his friends and continued to demand sole custody. Maria did the same. She also hoped to receive a substantial amount of child support. The conflict between Frank and Maria worsened over time. On several occasions, due to Maria's erratic behavior, Frank had to call the police for help. Maria repeatedly attacked Frank and the children, but not everyone believed this. In 2008, an incident occurred that confirmed Frank's accusations. After a fight with Maria near their children's school, Maria was arrested. The problem stemmed from Maria wanting to pick up her daughter. But Frank's relatives prevented her. The reason was that the two had made another agreement, but Maria changed her mind at the last minute. After the fight, Maria put the child in the car but forgot to fasten the seatbelt. When the police checked her car, they discovered that Maria's actions could endanger the life and health of the child. As a result, Maria got into trouble with the law. She was charged with disorderly conduct and child endangerment. In addition, Frank also accused Maria of stalking him, claiming that she had stalked him on multiple occasions. For this reason, Maria faced an additional charge. Maria could not be convicted of endangering the life of the child because the prosecution could not prove it. Therefore, the authorities decided to drop the charge in exchange for Maria's admission of guilt for disorderly conduct and stalking. Maria agreed and was fined $600. However, this event did not make Maria reconsider her behavior. Instead, she continued to act negatively. Frank's acquaintances and relatives increasingly heard complaints from him about Maria threatening and stalking him. Some of Maria's co-workers also said that she repeatedly mentioned that she hated Frank and was willing to harm him. For this reason, one of her co-workers nicknamed her Black Widow. Frank tried to stay calm and smooth over the rough edges, but Maria wouldn't stop. He kept trying to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen. Frank started recording every conflict so that he would have evidence in case something bad happened. He just wanted to live and work in peace, but Maria took it too far. In 2009, Frank tried to stay positive and eventually met a woman named Julie. However, Maria soon learned about his new relationship. According to Maria, she didn't care that Frank was dating Julie, but what bothered her was that Frank gave Julie access to the children. However, Frank thought that Maria was extremely jealous, and that was the cause of all the trouble. Maria then became very angry. In February 2009, she sent a voice message to Julie, warning her not to go near the children. However, the situation worsened when Maria's father was released from prison after serving 5 years for fraud. His reputation was already bad, and for Frank, this meant more trouble, as he knew Maria's father had a fierce temper. Many believed that Maria had inherited her fierce personality from her father. As Frank became pensive and anxious, his colleagues noticed it too. The first incident that happened after Maria's father Anthony was released was a robbery at Frank's office. Important documents that could affect Frank's divorce were stolen. The next day, Maria called Frank and hinted that she had found something interesting. Frank understood that she was referring to the stolen documents and advised her to return them. At the same time, he also reported the incident to the police. However, it was unsuccessful in proving that someone was involved in the incident. The detectives did not find any traces of the perpetrator. However, everyone suspected that Maria and her father were involved in the crime. The police also considered Maria a suspect. In the end, the investigation of the case was stopped. However, thanks to the intervention of the police, Maria returned the stolen documents to the owner. It is likely that these documents did not contain any important information that could be used in court. The situation between Frank and Maria continued to escalate. Frank's patience was at its limit after Maria repeatedly threatened him on social media. This was because Frank's children were still in contact with his new partner, Julie. Julie, on the other hand, remained calm and balanced, enjoying her time with Frank and his children. She tried not to interfere in Frank and Maria's complicated relationship. However, Frank was extremely angry that Maria had neglected her parental responsibilities. The arguments between the two continued until 2010. At that point, Frank sought the intervention of law enforcement. He asked the police to evaluate Maria's behavior. Despite the threats, Maria insisted that it was just her way of communicating and that she meant nothing reprehensible. Again, Maria's guilt could not be proven because her warnings were vague. In January 2010, a fire brought negativity to Frank. In a strange coincidence, before a romantic trip to the Caribbean islands that he had planned, a fire broke out at Frank's mother's house the night before the trip. Fortunately, no one was injured, but all the property was destroyed by fire and smoke. During this fire, witnesses reported seeing a car driven by Maria, accompanied by neighbors and friends, visiting the house at that time. Maria smiled and watched the fire before leaving. After the fire department put out the fire, a dog owned by one of Frank's children was found dead in the fire. Maria's actions crossed the line, forcing the police to investigate the incident. Unfortunately, there was no clear evidence of arson at the time, and the fire was ruled an accident. Maria then sent Frank a frantic text message, gloating about how karma had caught up with him and how her life had been ruined. She hinted that Frank could face more consequences in the future. Maria also began sending similar messages to Julie, Frank's new partner. When the police failed to act, Maria's aggression escalated. She became so dangerous that she openly threatened Frank and Julie. A few months later, a fire broke out at Julie's house. This time, the situation could have been much worse. Julie was home when the fire broke out, but she was lucky to escape by jumping off the porch. Although she was uninjured, her house was severely damaged and uninhabitable. As a result, Frank invited Julie to move in with him. Frank and Julie feared that this would only make Maria angrier, but they had no other choice. The police are investigating the exact cause of the fire. A similar situation in the past suggests that the fire may have been intentionally set by an individual. Frank and Julie live in a different district than the burned street, so they hope that the police will conduct a fair and impartial investigation. However, once again, there is not much they can do due to the lack of concrete evidence. However, the investigators did not give up. Julie hired private investigators to join the investigation, which pushed the inquiry in a new direction. During the inspection, 2 flares were found on the lawn. One was broken and lying nearby. Investigators also discovered that the fire had spread from the steps leading to the balcony of the house. Finally, after collecting and examining the data, experts determined that the cause of the fire was arson. However, the lack of direct evidence has prevented authorities from identifying the perpetrators. The suspects remain at large and have not been prosecuted for their crimes. The cold summer of 2012 marked a tragic event in the life of the Frank family. In June 2012, Frank and Julie decided to split up, but in reality, it was just a plan to distract Maria. However, this also marked the final farewell of the Frank family. Just a few weeks later, Frank was found dead. On July 3, Joe, a close friend of Frank's, decided to visit him because he had not heard from him for a while. Joe and Frank used to take their children out together, and their team was currently in an important series of matches. However, when Frank did not answer the phone, Joe decided to visit him in person. When he arrived at Frank's house, Joe became worried when he saw that the front door was slightly ajar and there were stains near it. His fear was confirmed when he entered the house and saw Frank lying motionless on the floor. Frank's face was serene, as if he had finally found the peace he had been looking for. However, when Joe walked around the body, he saw dried blood in Frank's ear. Without hesitation, Joe called emergency services. As news of the incident spread throughout the county, everyone knew that this was a terrible crime. However, the detectives had to take matters into their own hands to find out who was behind this murder. Investigators discovered many important signs at the crime scene. They found large pools of blood and drag marks on the floor, along with a clear shoe print and bloody gloves in the kitchen. This physical evidence was sent for analysis. The investigation results showed that the bloody shoe print matched the size of the gloves that Maria's father, Anthony, often wore. Furthermore, Maria's DNA was found on the gloves. Since Maria had not lived with the family for over a year, the presence of her DNA on the gloves was unlikely to have happened by accident. All the evidence pointed to the involvement of Anthony and Maria in the case. Both were subsequently arrested. Autopsy results and ballistics analysis revealed that Frank had been shot with two different weapons. The first bullet was fired from a .30 caliber sniper rifle as he stood by the front door. Forensic experts found a sniper nest about 115 feet from the house. The bullet went through Frank's arm and chest, causing severe and fatal injuries. The attackers dragged Frank into the house, where they fired a final shot into his head with a .357 Magnum revolver. Frank was already dead at that point. This action was considered an act of revenge, suggesting that the shooter harbored a grudge against the victim. Police speculated that Anthony shot Frank with the rifle. There were also some important clues left behind. Frank's car and dog were missing from the house, implicating Anthony and Maria. A review of traffic cameras showed Frank's car driving away from the victim's house shortly after the crime. However, the driver could not be identified. The car was later found in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, 27 miles from Frank's house and 5 miles from Maria's residence. However, no fingerprints or other evidence were found inside the car. Frank's dog was found 2 days after the crime when it wandered into a wedding in Dauphin. Thanks to an electronic chip, attendees realized that the dog had an owner. The dog was later returned to Frank's mother. The fact that Frank had purchased the dog after the fire helped shed some light on the case. During the investigation, detectives discovered that the criminals had taken the dog as they were fleeing the scene. During the time Anthony was stopped, the dog was attracted to the smell of food nearby and escaped. It then wandered into a house where a wedding was being held, where it was found. This helped detectives prove that Anthony's phone was near the venue of the celebration on the day of the crime, even though he claimed to be at home in Harrisburg, 12 miles away. It is possible that Maria was the one who put the dog in the car, but this decision proved to be a mistake. During questioning, Anthony admitted that Frank had asked him for help several times and that he had visited Frank the day before Frank died. This would explain the traces found at the crime scene. However, Anthony could not explain the presence of the pool of blood. His testimony sounded disingenuous. Anthony also confessed that Frank had given him the car to use that same day. apparently to justify his fingerprints at the victim's house. This would indicate that he had been at the crime scene the day before. Searches were conducted at Anthony and Maria's homes to find the murder weapon, but Anthony was a seasoned criminal and knew how to handle weapons. Therefore, neither the rifle nor the pistol was found. Maria also refused to admit her guilt. She assumed that the glove had been accidentally sent to her ex-husband's house, possibly because the children had moved it one day. Eventually, Anthony and Maria were released to go home. However, detectives continued to investigate and collect the evidence needed to solve the case. Meanwhile, Frank's friend Derek Reed tried to talk to Maria at a school football game. During the conversation, Maria confessed that the last thing her husband saw before he died was her face. This statement was strange and curious. The investigation into Frank's death received intense attention from the state attorney general. The attorney general was furious with the indifference of the authorities to Frank's reports and statements. The police also faced numerous complaints of incompetence, and an internal investigation was inevitable. However, the police's negligence in their duties could not be proven. The reason was that much of the information provided by Frank, which the police believed lacked solid evidence, contributed to Frank's tragic death. The public and Frank's relatives were outraged that their petition had not yielded results. Meanwhile, investigators tried to prove the suspect's guilt not only in the crime but also in stalking and other crimes committed before. In 2013, a major interrogation was held. At the same time, Maria and Anthony continued to claim their innocence, denying all 12 charges against them. Their unwillingness to cooperate with the investigation led to charges of providing false testimony. Prosecutors argued that the suspects had arrived at Frank's home together, but they chose not to use their own vehicles to avoid attracting attention. Instead, they fled the scene in Frank's car. By the end of 2014, Maria was recaptured. Meanwhile, Anthony successfully escaped. After being interrogated one last time, Anthony boarded a plane and flew to Colombia. According to the investigation, Anthony's escape was evidence that he was hiding his guilt. For 11 months, Anthony was on the run but was eventually captured in Buenos Aires, Argentina. After being arrested by local police, he fought extradition to the United States but was unsuccessful and was deported back to his home country. In the fall of 2015, Maria's trial began. She continued to deny her guilt and blamed her father. She claimed that she loved Frank and never wanted him dead. However, multiple witnesses came forward to shed light on her true nature, recounting the threats, stalking, and sabotage she had committed. After more than a week of trial, the jury returned a verdict, finding her guilty on all counts, including murder, arson, burglary, perjury, conspiracy, and menacing. Maria was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 50 years. Witnesses reported that she smiled throughout the trial. Years later, Anthony's trial began. Anthony was furious when he heard his daughter's accusations. He claimed he was only helping her but objected to the use of violence. However, the physical evidence suggested otherwise. Finally, in the fall of 2018, Anthony was convicted of murder, robbery, and arson. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 45 years. When he was sentenced, the 77-year-old blew a kiss to the prosecutor and the lead detective before cursing at the judge. Years later, Anthony sought to appeal, claiming his defense attorney was ineffective, which led to his conviction. His daughter, Maria, also tried to appeal her case. However, both Maria and Anthony's efforts were unsuccessful. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Judy Blake Morlanen. Judy Blake was born on October 16, 1957, in Hancock, Michigan, into a conservative family. As the only daughter, Judy was loved dearly by her parents and two older brothers. Her parents, Dale and Mary Ann, were active members of the Redeemer Free Lutheran Church and also ran a successful business called Dale Service. Through this, they provided Judy with a comfortable life in a warm environment. In 1974, Judy met Bruce Morlanen. Both worked in the healthcare industry, with Judy as a nurse and Bruce as a support worker. The age difference was only 3 years, yet the two were complete opposites. While Judy was shy and gentle, Bruce was outgoing and confident. Judy's family was a little apprehensive about Bruce, but love helped Judy and Bruce convince their families, and they got married in 1978. In the following years, Judy's family tried to accept and make Bruce an integral part of her life. It seemed to work because Bruce got along well with Judy's family. Another happy turning point came in 1989 when Judy gave birth to their daughter, Elise. However, the joy and peace in their family life were short-lived. On November 29, 1992, after Thanksgiving, Judy and Bruce visited Judy's family and brought Elise with them. It was also the last day of hunting season in the Upper Peninsula. Bruce and Judy's brothers went into the nearby woods to hunt deer on Sunday morning, while Judy stayed at home with her mother and Elise. Judy took her Springer Spaniel and her parents' dog, Streak, for a walk in the woods behind the Blake home on Highway 38 in Ontonagon County, Michigan. When Judy's mother, Mary Ann, said goodbye to her daughter, she had no idea it would be the last time she would see her. 2.5 hours passed without Judy, and Mary Ann became worried. Although Judy was familiar with the woods, the possibility of an accident or trouble was concerning, especially since hunting was still ongoing. A neighbor joined Mary Ann in searching for Judy. As it grew dark, the two women had difficulty following Judy's footprints along the trail. After nearly an hour of searching, Mary Ann came across a terrifying sight. On one of the trails in the woods, Mary Ann saw Judy lying motionless. The dogs were still circling the area. When they tried to turn Judy over, they found a terrible wound and bleeding in her chest, indicating that Judy was no longer alive. When Mary Ann discovered Judy's death, she ran home and reported the incident to the local authorities. Investigators soon determined that Judy had died from a gunshot wound. Although the night was getting colder, the police decided to search the woods with flashlights in hand. However, after searching the entire area, they still did not find many clues, including the bullet that killed Judy. However, they did find one important trace, a burn mark on a maple tree. Detective Bob Ball, who was in charge of the case, believed that the burn mark could have been caused by the bullet that killed Judy. He hoped that if the bullet was found, it would shed some light on the case. Forensic tests later confirmed that the burn mark was indeed caused by a bullet. Based on the position of the body in the burn marks, investigators concluded that the bullet struck Judy first, passed through her heart, exited her body through her left side, hit a tree, and eventually landed somewhere in the woods. Initially, the incident was ruled a tragic accident. Investigators believed that a stray bullet from an unknown hunter killed Judy, which was not unusual in the area. However, determining who was responsible for Judy's death was a difficult task, as bullets from high-powered rifles can often travel 3 miles or more. Most of the time, hunters don't realize that their bullets have killed a person. While Judy's body is being taken to the medical examiner's office, the detectives begin interviewing family members. Everyone seems deeply saddened by the tragedy, but an unusual statement from Bruce makes Detective Bob uncomfortable. Bruce criticizes Judy for not being more careful. Bruce becomes a suspect because, in most brutal cases, the person closest to the victim is usually the suspect. However, Detective Bob also knows that Bruce may just be a husband trying to hide his grief. Bruce's brothers claim that Bruce was with them all day, and they are certain that he had nothing to do with Judy's death. They are even unhappy with the police for considering Bruce a suspect. After 2 days, the autopsy report reveals an important detail about the time of death, estimating it at around 3 p.m. When Detective Bob returns to interview Judy's family again with this new information, Bruce's relatives reveal that although Bruce was with them for most of the day, they did not see him at a particular time. Judy's family, however, remains completely convinced of his innocence. They believe the investigation is flawed in accusing a man who is still grieving the loss of his wife. However, they do not know that the detectives have their own reasons for believing that Judy's death was not an accident. By analyzing the trajectory of the bullet and forensic evidence, investigators find that the bullet entered the body at an upward angle. This is a significant finding because if Judy had been shot by a hunter, the bullet would have entered the body at a downward angle. This raises the suspicion that Judy's death was a targeted murder. However, one question remains: was the killer really Bruce? To verify their suspicions, the detectives decide to summon Bruce for a thorough investigation. On December 11, 1992, just 12 days after the investigation began, Bruce is invited to the sheriff's office for a formal interview. After a brief interview with Detective Bob, Bruce recounts in detail where he had been on the day his wife died and provides the names of nearly 30 people who witnessed his presence that day. However, there is a suspicious 30-minute gap in Bruce's itinerary on the day of the incident that he cannot explain. Despite his repeated claims of having nothing to do with his wife's death, this gap causes Detective Bob to begin questioning what Bruce might be hiding. The truth about Bruce's guilt remains unclear, but his behavior raises suspicions. After his wife's death, Bruce does not spend much time on the funeral. Over the following weeks, he goes skiing, hangs out with friends, and even flirts with some of his deceased wife's friends instead of taking care of his daughter. This causes Judy's family to begin suspecting Bruce, although they initially supported him. Bruce's behavior is the cause of this suspicion. The police are actively investigating the case but have not yet found any concrete evidence against him. To gain information, Detective Bob asks some of Bruce's friends and colleagues to secretly follow him and report back to the police if they see anything suspicious. This method of surveillance reveals an important detail. One of the people asked to follow Bruce is Gail, a 35-year-old colleague. She has a remarkable story to tell the detectives about Bruce. Shortly after the funeral, Bruce shows up uninvited at Gail's house, carrying 5 boxes filled with his deceased wife's belongings. After placing the boxes on Gail's porch, Bruce left before Gail could ask for more information. Since it was the holidays, Gail left the boxes outside for a while without paying attention to them. When she opened the boxes, she discovered that most of them were filled with Judy's clothes. But in one of the boxes, under the pile of clothes, Gail found a letter written 6 months earlier and signed by Judy. Finding this letter was a surprise to Gail, as she had only met Judy once. What was even stranger was the content of the letter. The letter began with Judy's request that Gail keep her old clothes as a souvenir, as she believed that Gail was the only person Bruce trusted. The letter then went into many intimate details about Bruce and Judy's marriage, about why they were no longer compatible and were on the verge of divorce. The letter even mentioned that Bruce needed a new girlfriend. The strangest thing about the letter was that the writer ended by praising Bruce's ability in bed. The letter immediately made Gail feel that something was wrong. The detectives felt the same way. To verify the authenticity of the letter, they showed it to forensic examiner James Stegall. He was tasked with comparing the letter to a sample of Judy's handwriting to see if it was really written by Judy. Handwriting analysis revealed that the handwriting in the letter indicated the speed of the writer, appearing slow and deliberate, which could be a sign of forgery. Judy was ruled out as the author of the letter, but it was also impossible to definitively confirm that the handwriting was Bruce's. With no conclusive evidence against Bruce, the detectives had to rely on limited resources to find more information. Detective Bob decided to continue interviewing Gail. Gail revealed that Bruce had been trying to get her attention for a long time, even before Judy's death. However, Gail, who is happily married, only sees Bruce as a nuisance. Bruce constantly flirts, but Gail deliberately ignores him and hopes he will give up. Gail is not the only one who dislikes Bruce. No one has a good word to say about him. At work, he often flirts with other female employees, causing everyone to try to stay away. His colleagues complain that he is difficult to work with. Gail also reveals that after his wife passed away, he bragged about being rich. According to Gail, this was just his attempt to seduce her. This information makes Detective Bob interested in investigating Bruce's marriage. They speculate that Bruce and Judy often quarrel because of Bruce's habit of flirting at work, but it is uncertain whether Judy is aware of Bruce's behavior towards female colleagues at work. However, the detective also discovered that Bruce and Judy's financial problems, caused primarily by Bruce's irresponsibility in overspending, had occurred in the months leading up to Judy's death. Bruce was deeply in debt, and the situation had become so serious that he was forced to borrow money from one place to pay off another. Judy had always managed her finances well throughout the marriage with her income, but she eventually began to resent Bruce, especially when she was given the added responsibility of caring for their daughter. The detectives discovered that a few weeks before Judy's death, Bruce had begun taking out multiple insurance policies in Judy's name, some of which had a double payout clause if Judy died in an accident. Detective Bob wondered if Bruce saw this as an opportunity to solve his financial problems and get out of the marriage with Judy. In fact, after Judy's death, Bruce was due to receive $330,000 from her insurance policies. What made investigators shudder was that in 1991, nearly 14 months before Judy's death, she had suffered a horrific accident. An 85-pound chimney block accidentally fell from the roof where Bruce was working, hitting Judy in the head and nearly killing her. Fortunately, she survived the attack, although she suffered a severe concussion and was hospitalized for several days. In another shocking development, a fire broke out in her house while Judy was sleeping alone. Fortunately, Judy woke up in time, called the fire department, and escaped once again. After these two incidents, Judy was very frightened. Some of Judy's friends told detectives that she had expressed her intention to leave her husband. Although she had a premonition that something was wrong, she stayed for the sake of her daughter. Judy's family was unaware of her feelings. At this point, Detective Bob Ball was almost certain that Bruce had killed his wife and deliberately staged it as a hunting accident, but he lacked physical evidence. He contacted Dan Castle, a metal detector expert who had helped the police many times before. Knowing that the fatal bullet might still be somewhere in the woods, Detective Bob asked Dan Castle to find it. Dan worked with his metal detector every day, but after searching for weeks without finding anything, he had a problem. The snow had covered up all traces of the bullet. Despite the setback, Dan was not ready to give up. He decided to experiment by using a slingshot to recreate the trajectory of the bullet and determine where it might have landed. Luckily, the idea worked. When he searched the area where his marble ricocheted in the snow, he found the bullet about 80 feet from a maple tree. The discovery of the bullet was important, but authorities needed to determine whether it was the bullet that killed Judy or just another bullet fired during hunting season. Ray Kenny, a firearms examiner from the Marquette State Police Crime Lab, was assigned to analyze the bullet. A few days later, he discovered some important details. It was a .30 caliber bullet from a Moss rifle, and it contained wood fibers. Kenny determined that this was the bullet that had hit the tree, but there was more evidence stuck inside. Kenny found a small pink fiber from Judy's shirt and some black fibers from her jacket. Finally, a crucial link was discovered, creating a major breakthrough in the case. Investigators then focused on Bruce's gun collection. They examined all the rifles that could have fired the bullet collected from the scene and identified 4 weapons that could have been involved. Bruce was forced to tell the truth, but he still chose to lie and denied owning any of the rifles. However, his luck ran out when Judy and Bruce's financial records showed a loan document that listed his gun collection as collateral. Detectives also found an asset list that included a gun that Bruce had not declared. It was a rifle with a scope, matching one of the 4 guns that could have fired the bullet. In the end, investigators concluded that the gun was probably the murder weapon. On April 23, 1993, after 5 months of investigation, Bruce agreed to take a polygraph test after many delays and evasions. During the first part of the test, Bruce calmly answered the investigators' questions. However, when the detectives placed Gail's letter in front of him, the interview took a critical turn. For the first time, Bruce changed his story and confessed to killing his wife after months of denial, perhaps because he realized Gail had cooperated with the police or feared that the authorities were finally closing in on him. With tears in his eyes, Bruce revealed that on November 29, 1992, he saw an opportunity to kill his wife. However, he said that the first 2 times he saw Judy from a distance, he aimed but could not shoot. The 3rd time, he closed his eyes, pulled the trigger, and Judy was fatally shot. Bruce explained that his motive for killing Judy was her threat to divorce him, which he did not want to happen. He claimed that Judy was a strict wife both at work and at home, and was not good at cooking. Bruce said that he threw the rifle into a nearby river, but the police could not find it after searching the water. He also pointed out an error in the medical examiner's report. Although the report said Judy was shot on the left side of the chest, Bruce insisted that she was actually shot on the right side and the bullet exited the left side. This detail was crucial to his confession, as only the killer would know this. Bruce was immediately arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Surprisingly, despite his confession, he pleaded not guilty, claiming that the police had coerced him into confessing. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Bruce, prosecutors decided to seek more evidence in preparation for the trial. Investigators reenacted the moving of the chimney, which Bruce had previously said he had accidentally pushed with his foot. However, they discovered that the chimney was too heavy to have been moved accidentally and required a deliberate act to make it fall. With dozens of witnesses and a wealth of evidence, the trial swung in favor of the prosecution. During this time, Bruce barely moved but burst into tears when Gail took the stand to testify. The defense, on the other hand, had no witnesses to testify. Bruce's attorney, Thomas Castleman, said all of their witnesses refused to appear out of fear. He called the investigation a witch hunt and accused the police of improperly obtaining confessions. As expected, the jury did not believe Bruce's story, and on December 15, 1993, they returned a guilty verdict. On January 21, 1994, Bruce Moylanen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought comfort to Judy's family. After the tragedy, Judy's brother and sister-in-law, David and Yvonne Blake, adopted 5-year-old Elise. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sajini. In December 2002, Thurun Jinaraj and Sajini Krishnan, a newlywed couple, started their life together. Thurun and Sajini's marriage was arranged, but the couple was very happy and were building a life together in their apartment. Thurun, a physical education teacher at a local school and a volleyball coach, his wife, Sajini, worked at a bank. Whenever Thurun went to watch volleyball, he would remind his wife, Sajini, that due to the unsafe burglary situation in the area, Sajini should go to her father's house instead of staying alone in their apartment. Sajini's father lived nearby, so she would go to her father's house whenever Thurun went to watch volleyball. On February 5, 2003, Sajini visited her father's house for the last time. Before leaving, she said that she needed money to fill up her car's gas tank. Sajini's father was surprised and asked if Thuran was taking good care of her. Sajini appeared angry and dismissed her father's concerns, saying, "Dad, there's no such thing." Her short reply made her father feel uncomfortable, thinking that it might just be a minor disagreement between the couple. On February 14, 2003, at 7:30 p.m., Sajini had a phone conversation with her sister that lasted about 15 minutes. 2 hours later, at about 9:30 p.m., Thuran contacted Sajini's father, informing him to come to the hospital immediately because Sajini's condition was critical. Family members rushed to the hospital and found that Sajini had passed away. Thuran was deeply moved and cried loudly. Sajini's cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a scarf. When the police arrived at the scene, Thuran reported that their house had been broken into, jewelry and money had been stolen, and belongings had been thrown around. Initially, the police suspected that the thieves might have killed Sajini when she discovered them. Thuran's emotional state was so shocked that he couldn't stop crying. His pain was too great, and as a result, his condition worsened. He was so distraught that he couldn't even attend Sajini's funeral. Due to his deteriorating condition, Thuran was hospitalized, where his family provided him with emotional support. Meanwhile, the police were working to identify potential suspects by compiling a list of known thieves in the area. On February 16, 2003, 2 days after Sajini's death, Thuran's brother contacted the police, informing them that Thuran had escaped from the hospital. The police were shocked to find that Thuran had escaped from the hospital. Initially, they had assumed that Thuran was completely innocent due to his poor condition, so the police did not assign anyone to closely monitor Thuran while he was in the hospital. However, Thuran's sudden disappearance aroused the police's suspicions. Sajini's family began questioning the police, demanding to know why they had let their guard down and allowed Thuran to escape. As the case attracted widespread media attention, the pressure on the police increased. They immediately launched a thorough search for Thuran. Meanwhile, Thuran's family was also brought in for questioning by the police, but they were released after a few days. Thuran lived with Sajini in an apartment, while the rest of his family lived elsewhere. A massive search operation was launched across the city to find Thuran. The police set up roadblocks at several locations. Despite these efforts, Thuran remained undetected. Pressure from Sajini's family on the police led to the announcement of a large reward for anyone providing information on Thuran's whereabouts. However, even this lucrative offer failed to yield any leads. Police searches were ultimately unsuccessful. It was later revealed that Thuran had been mistreating Sajini since their marriage, motivated by his extramarital affair with another woman. The police eventually tracked down the girl Thuran had been involved with. She told them that on February 16, Thuran had called her and asked her to marry him. However, she had already learned about Sajini's death by then. As a result, she rejected Thuran's proposal outright, telling him she couldn't marry someone suspected of murder. After that, Thuran and the girl lost contact. Nearly 6 years passed without any update on Thuran from the police. The police kept a close watch on Thuran's family, thinking that he might contact or return home. However, Thuran did not see or contact his family during this time. The police discovered that exactly 6 years after the incident, Thuran had visited his parents in another state, but only briefly, as his father had passed away just a day later. Although the police expected Thuran to return for his father's funeral, Thuran did not return. In 2016, a new officer joined the department and reviewed the case file, asking for an update. The police informed him of the current situation, that Thuran's father had passed away, his mother was ill and living in Madhya Pradesh, and his brother lived in Ahmedabad, but there was still no information about Thuran's whereabouts. The police conducted another investigation by discreetly monitoring the area around Thuran's mother's house, looking for any young men who might visit her. Unfortunately, no leads were found. The police then decided to question the girl who had a relationship with Thuran. She reported that she had not had any contact with Thuran since the incident. However, some of her friends had recently mentioned to her that they thought they saw someone who looked like Thuran at a mall in Delhi. The police formed a team to investigate this new information and visited the mall in Delhi. They checked the footage from all the surveillance cameras, but could not find any evidence of Thuran. After receiving multiple reports of sightings of Thuran in various states, the police became increasingly convinced that he was still alive. They therefore launched a thorough investigation by analyzing around 4,000 mobile phone numbers linked to Thuran's family and friends, hoping to uncover a vital clue. Although their search did not yield any significant breakthroughs, the police were determined to find Thuran. They kept a close watch on his mother's phone, scrutinizing her calls to identify her contacts. Thuran's mother received a call on her mobile phone from a landline number in Bengaluru, also known as the Silicon Valley of India. The call originated from the customer care service of a Bengaluru-based Oracle company. This made the police wonder about the connection between Thuran's mother and the Oracle company. The police suspected that Thuran, whom they were looking for, might be working at the Oracle office in Bengaluru. A police team traveled from Ahmedabad to Bengaluru to investigate further. On October 22, 2018, police visited the Oracle office and met the HR department, but police did not disclose the real purpose of their visit. Instead, they informed the HR department that police needed a list of all employees for law and order purposes. The HR department cooperated and provided the police with a complete list of all Oracle employees. In order to avoid being detected by Thuran, the police had to be extremely careful in their approach, as they knew that Thuran would likely escape if he realized that the police were following him. The problem was, Thuran's name was not on the list that Oracle had provided to the police. This made them worry that their efforts might be in vain. However, one name on the list stood out: Parvin Batelli. When the police recalled that Thuran's mother often spoke to Parvin and his wife, Nisha, this connection piqued the police's interest, and they decided to gather more information about Parvin and Nisha in the hope of finding clues about Thuran. The police found it suspicious that Parvin and Nisha were not active on social media, as this is a rare phenomenon in today's digital age, when most people actively share their lives on social media. The police learned that Thuran's mother frequently talked to Parvin Batelli. In addition, Parvin and Nisha had 2 children. The police began to suspect that Parvin Batelli could be Thuran. Therefore, the police began to collect evidence against him. One feature of Thuran's finger during his time as a volleyball coach was a broken and slightly bent finger on his ring hand. On October 23, 2 policemen went to Oracle's customer service office in Bangalore to meet Parvin. When one of the policemen shook hands with Parvin, the policeman immediately recognized Thuran because of the familiar broken finger. The policeman said, "Thuran, your game is over." Upon hearing Thuran's name, Parvin's condition worsened. Thuran's mistake began when his cell phone stopped working, leaving him worried about his mother. Thuran used his office landline instead of a number he could safely use to contact his mother. This last mistake led to his arrest. If he had not used his office landline, the police likely would not have found him. Thuran was taken to Ahmedabad by the police, where he confessed to the crime, admitting to killing his wife Sajini Krishnan. Thuran shared the entire story with the police. After the murder, Thuran proposed to a friend, but was rejected. He then moved to Pune, took up a small job, and met Nisha. Thuran tricked Nisha into believing that he was an orphan with no family, after which the two got married. The couple moved to Bangalore in 2009, where Thuran began working for Oracle. After years of investigation and manhunt, Thuran Jinaraj was finally recaptured in 2019. In March 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anupama Gulati. Anupama, who lives with her husband and 2 children, was born and raised in Dehradun, but her parents and brother were often worried because they could not reach her on the phone. Since her family used to call her frequently, this loss of contact worried her family. Anupama's brother, Sujan Pradhan, decided to call Anupama's husband, Rajesh Gulati, whom she had been married to since 1999, to ask about his sister. However, every time Sujan Pradhan called, Rajesh would say that Anupama was either busy or had gone on a business trip. This went on for about 2 weeks. During this time, Anupama contacted her brother via email, informing him that she was completely fine and very happy with her husband and 2 children. This reassured her family. However, when they continued to be unable to reach Anupama on the phone, her parents asked Sujan Pradhan to go to Dehradun and meet Anupama. On December 12, 2010, when Sujan Pradhan went to Rajesh's house, Rajesh greeted him unfriendly and said that Anupama was elsewhere and he could not meet her right away. On the other hand, Sujan Pradhan tried to break into Rajesh's house, leading to heated arguments between the two. However, Rajesh did not allow Sujan to enter the house. When Sujan asked Rajesh about Anupama, Rajesh did not provide a satisfactory answer. Sujan decided to go to the nearby police station and filed a missing report for his younger sister, Anupama Gulati. In the report, he also said that he was trying to enter the house but was prevented by Rajesh. The police found the case suspicious and went to Rajesh Gulati's house. When Rajesh saw the police with Sujan, Rajesh tried to remain calm. The police asked Rajesh about Anupama, but Rajesh did not answer directly and tried to distract them. However, the police soon discovered Rajesh's cunning and decided to conduct a full search of the house. During the search, the police noticed a closed room. When the room was opened, there was nothing unusual except a large freezer. The police found the presence of a freezer very strange because such appliances are commonly used in large shops and restaurants. The police wondered why Rajesh would buy such a large freezer for his small family, but he just kept quiet. The police decided to open the freezer to investigate and found many small black bags inside. When they opened one bag, they discovered pieces of meat and then took out some more envelopes. The surprise came when they found a human skull in one of these envelopes. Rajesh Gulati then confessed to the police that the pieces were the body of his wife, Anupama. He broke down in tears and narrated the story. After his confession, the police arrested Rajesh and took him to a local court. There, he was remanded in custody for 5 days. During further investigation, the police discovered a surprising piece of information. Rajesh explained that he had met Anupama at Delhi University, where they both studied and got to know each other. They soon developed feelings for each other and started falling in love. Initially, they kept their relationship a secret from their families, but later decided to go public and asked for permission to get married. Both families agreed and they had a grand wedding in 1999. After marriage, Rajesh's career grew rapidly, and he found a job in a large company in the US. Rajesh and Anupama moved to the US so that he could work as a software engineer. They were living comfortably now, and they had bought a house, which meant that their finances were stable. However, after a few months, Anupama started feeling lonely because Rajesh often went to work every day and she had to stay home alone. During her boredom, Anupama often contacted a close friend of Rajesh's. Later, Rajesh found out that Anupama had become close friends with a close friend of his. Rajesh felt uncomfortable knowing that Anupama and his friend were talking on the phone frequently. This caused many arguments between them. Rajesh asked Anupama many times to stay away from his friend, but she did not listen. This made the situation worse in their home. However, in 2006, Anupama gave birth to twins, and the birth of a daughter and a son brought happiness and harmony to the family. While living in the US, Rajesh and Anupama enjoyed a fairly comfortable life. However, that was completely disrupted in 2007 and 2008 when the US fell into an economic recession, leaving many unemployed. Rajesh, after trying to keep his job for a while, also fell into unemployment. To sustain the family, Rajesh used his savings, but as the situation could not last forever, the savings eventually ran out. At that time, Rajesh had no choice but to sell his house in the US. After selling the house, Rajesh decided to return to India with his family. However, Anupama continued to keep in touch with Rajesh's friends over the phone, and this caused a major argument that led to a conflict between Rajesh and Anupama. The arguments escalated and the couple took the matter to the family court. The court eventually decided that Rajesh would provide Anupama with 20,000 rupees per month to meet their expenses. Thereafter, Rajesh and Anupama lived together in a rented flat for a few months in a place called Governor. After some struggle, Rajesh got a job in a big company in Kolkata, about 990 miles away from his home. For the sake of his job, Rajesh had to leave his wife and 2 children and start a new life in Kolkata. In Kolkata, around 2009, Rajesh met a married woman who was suffering from an unhappy marriage. Her husband was not good and often abused her. When Rajesh heard the story of this woman, he felt sympathy for her and gradually, the two became close friends. Gradually, their friendship developed into love. After some time, they decided to marry each other secretly at a temple in Kolkata, without informing any of their family or friends. Rajesh returned to his normal routine after his second marriage. He maintained regular contact with his first wife, Anupama, went to work daily, and kept his second marriage a secret from everyone. However, Anupama noticed changes in Rajesh's behavior and suspected that he was involved with another woman in Kolkata. But she was unaware that Rajesh had actually remarried. The couple continued to argue over this issue and their relationship became so strained that Anupama started thinking about divorce. However, Rajesh successfully convinced Anupama and they did not go through with the divorce. But when Rajesh failed to pay Anupama the court-ordered maintenance of 20,000 rupees. These financial disputes finally reached a boiling point on October 17, 2010, when Rajesh and Anupama had a huge argument. Rajesh becomes enraged and violently pushes his wife, Anupama, causing her head to hit the corner of the bed. As a result, she starts bleeding profusely. Initially, Rajesh is shocked, but moments later, he lifts a pillow from the bed and uses it to smother Anupama. However, unbeknownst to Rajesh, Anupama is already deceased. Rajesh then frantically searches for a place to hide his wife's body, aware that his children will soon return home from school. With time of the essence, he moves Anupama's body to the second bathroom in the house and locks the door. As he tries to devise a plan to dispose of the body without arousing suspicion, his children arrive home from school and ask about their mother. Rajesh fabricates a story, telling them that their mother suddenly left for Delhi. Rajesh's children believe their mother, Anupama, had gone to visit their grandparents in Delhi. However, Rajesh had other plans. While the children were in school, he went to the market and purchased several items, including a deep freezer, an electric chainsaw, a stone cutter machine, and small black envelopes. When Rajesh brought these items home, he hid them in a separate room. When the children left for school the next day, Rajesh began the gruesome process of dismembering Anupama's body with an electric saw. He closed all the doors and windows to block out the noise. According to Rajesh's statement, Rajesh cut Anupama's body into 72 pieces. He then placed each piece into black bags and carefully stored the bags in the deep freezer to prevent the smell of the deceased from spreading. This process took Rajesh several days to complete. During this time, Rajesh continued to deceive Anupama's parents and brother by making excuses whenever they called, unaware of the horrific events unfolding at his residence. Rajesh took steps to cover up Anupama's disappearance by making excuses to their neighbors and telling their children that their mother had traveled to Delhi. He also had access to Anupama's email account, which allowed him to maintain communication with Sujan Pradhan, Anupama's brother, making it seem as though Anupama was still alive. Following the murder, Rajesh took the children on a weekend trip to Mussoorie in Uttarakhand. During the trip, he would collect 2 or 3 envelopes from the fridge containing pieces of Anupama's body and dispose of them in the forests or gorge along the way. This revelation shocked everyone, and the police began searching the areas where Rajesh claimed to have disposed of Anupama's remains. After an extensive search, the police found some black bags containing body parts in the surrounding forests and gorge. Based on this evidence, Rajesh Gulati was arrested and sent to jail. Rajesh Gulati's twin children were sent to Delhi to live with Anupama's brother, Sujan Pradhan. A court had granted Sujan official custody of the children on March 7, 2011. Rajesh Gulati's father, Satyapal Gulati, appealed this decision but was unsuccessful. On November 3, 2012, the court dismissed his appeal and confirmed that Chari would retain custody of the children. Evidence provided by the police revealed the horrific nature of the crime. Rajesh Gulati had brutally murdered his wife and then cut her body into 72 pieces. After a 7-year trial, Rajesh Gulati was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment on September 1, 2017. He was also ordered to pay a fine of 1.5 million rupees. The court ordered that 70,000 rupees of the fine would go to the state treasury, while the remaining amount would be deposited in the names of the twin children. The children would have access to this money only after they came of age. Rajesh Gulati was sentenced in a lower court, but he appealed this decision in a higher court in 2018. However, there has been no ruling on his appeal yet, resulting in his prolonged imprisonment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Zhu Ling. The story begins at a prestigious event at Tsinghua University, often referred to as the Harvard of China. The university has teamed up with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra to stage a performance. The audience is dressed in formal attire, with the men in dark suits and the women in beautiful evening gowns, all chatting politely as they take their seats in the grand theater. Zhu Ling, a student from Tsinghua University, is set to take the stage that evening. For Zhu, her assignment is to play a 6-minute solo on the guqin, a traditional Chinese instrument. This performance will be a defining moment for her future career. The audience, which includes professors, bosses, and benefactors, is vital to her career prospects, and she needs to engage them and leave a lasting impression with her performance. The guqin is a derided instrument favored by intellectuals. In Chinese culture, guqin players are often considered refined and gentle. A Song Dynasty guqin sold for $22 million, making it one of the most valuable musical instruments. In the days leading up to the event, stress-induced stomach aches and blurred vision took their toll on her health. Zhu's friends gathered near the stage, their anxiety evident as they watched her prepare to perform. For 2 months, Zhu had devoted herself to this moment. When Zhu stepped onto the stage, bowed to the audience, and began to play the guqin, her friends held their breath. But as the music filled the theater, their tension disappeared. Zhu's stage presence was captivating, her hands moving gently, creating beautiful sounds that echoed in the hearts of the audience. Some of her friends were deeply moved, tears rolling down their faces. The 6-minute performance ended and the audience applauded enthusiastically. Zhu bowed to the audience, smiled, and walked off the stage. Her best friend was in the crowd, proudly applauding enthusiastically. Because the hard work of practicing had left her completely exhausted, that night, Zhu Ling decided to skip the celebration and go home to rest. When she went to take a shower, standing under the cool water of the shower, washing her hair, she caught a glimpse of a strand of hair floating on her hand. Panicked, she ran her hand through her hair and touched her scalp. She quickly pulled back the shower curtain and ran to the mirror to check. Ju's reflection in the mirror showed a face of exhausted exhaustion, with uneven bald patches that looked like they had been shaved off carelessly. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, her condition rapidly deteriorated, leaving her confined to a wheelchair, unable to move, speak, or even control her facial expressions. She went from a promising student at Tsinghua University to someone with the intellectual capacity of a 6-year-old. This was not the result of an illness or genetic disorder. Tsinghua University is one of the most prestigious schools in China, making it extremely competitive for local students to gain admission. With an acceptance rate of just 0.4% for local students, the university has a massive annual budget of $5 billion and is known for educating the children of influential politicians and wealthy businessmen, who are often highly educated. Getting into college is just the first hurdle. The real challenge lies in coping with the fierce competition and rivalry that pervades college life. Many alumni have come forward to admit that they have resorted to deceit and deception, such as betraying friends and deceiving others, to stay ahead. This cutthroat environment is a direct result of the university culture, which strongly fosters a competitive spirit. Zhu Ling, a 1994 chemistry major at Tsinghua University, is one of the top 3 students in her class of 31. Her class consists of 20 men and 11 women. She is an outstanding student and is considered by many to be special. Zhu is not only smart but also has an outstanding appearance. Everyone expects great things from her and predicts a bright future. Zhu has a charisma and confidence that makes her friends jealous when she first arrives at the dormitory. Her warm and friendly demeanor quickly won her friends and fans. She attended classes diligently, and many were amazed by her seemingly endless energy. However, after a few months, people began to notice a strange and inexplicable decline in Zhu's health. She began arriving to class later than her classmates and always appeared exhausted during lectures. She sweated as if she was overheated. Zhu had a hard time concentrating on the lesson content. One day, she even had a severe stomachache. Zhu asked for painkillers from the school's infirmary, but the pain was only slightly relieved. Her teacher thought it was a stomachache caused by stress. Zhu's health began to deteriorate. She began to come to class a little late, and gradually she was absent from classes altogether. Her friends were very worried and decided to visit her at the dormitory, where she lived with 3 other girls. When they arrived, they found Zhu lying on the bed, shaking and moaning in pain. Her black hair was falling out in patches. Her friends were worried and urged her to see a doctor, but Zhu said she was just stressed and would return to class the next day, assuring them that she would be back to normal by the end of the semester. The once healthy Zhu was now almost unrecognizable. Her skin had turned pale, and her lips had turned purple. She moved slowly and painfully, as if every step caused her excruciating pain. Most of her hair had fallen out, leaving her nearly bald, forcing her to constantly wear something to cover her head. Zhu also suffered from recurring vision problems, resulting in temporary blindness that lasted for hours at a time, adding to her distress. Rumors of Zhu Ling's deteriorating condition quickly spread throughout the school. Many students speculated about the cause of her symptoms, suggesting that she might have cancer, hair loss, or an immune system disorder. However, a more worrying theory emerged among the students, who believed that Zhu's decline was related to stress caused by a disagreement with her close friend Sunny. The conflict began when Zhu missed an important orchestra rehearsal for a difficult piece. Sunny told her instructor that Zhu did not attend because she thought she was too good and believed that others needed to catch up to her level before she could participate. The revelation of Sunny's malicious comments was extremely difficult for Zhu to accept. Beige, a friend from Peking University, and Zhu's high school friends decided to visit her in the hospital, bringing a basket of fruit. However, upon entering the hospital room, Beige was shocked. His first reaction was to run away, not because he was afraid of being infected, but because he was shocked to see his classmate in such a bad condition. He couldn't understand how a 20-year-old girl full of vitality could change so quickly. What kind of disease could take away everything Zhu had worked so hard to build? The medical team was confused by Zhu's condition. Just a few months ago, she was still very healthy, but now she was critically ill, attached to many machines and nasal tubes, barely wearing clothes and almost bald. Her body convulsed, her face was partially paralyzed, and her eyes were wide open, desperately begging for help. Just the slightest touch caused her excruciating pain. Even the thin fabric of the hospital gown was unbearable for her. Seeing the silent cry for help in Zhu's eyes, Beige decided to seek answers, along with Zhu's parents, to try to understand her condition and find a solution. Zhu initially suffered from mild abdominal pain for a month or two before her condition worsened. These pains would come and go unexpectedly, like contractions. The pain became more intense over the next week, forcing her to bend over in pain and often curl up on the ground. As the pain worsened, Zhu's parents said she tried to control the pain by drinking a lot of Chinese herbal tea. However, the tea had no effect and the pain became more and more intense, eventually causing her to pass out. At first, Zhu did not seek medical attention, hoping that her symptoms would subside on their own due to her busy school schedule. But her condition worsened as her vision began to deteriorate. Her vision blurred, then disappeared for hours. Things got worse for Zhu as her hair began to fall out. Her condition continued to deteriorate, forcing her parents to take her to the hospital, which happened just days before Christmas, marking her first hospital stay. That month, Zhu's parents continued to support her throughout her treatment. Tests showed that Zhu was free of arsenic and mercury poisoning. A doctor from another hospital who had treated a similar case in the 1960s suggested a possible case of thallium poisoning. This seemed plausible, but Zhu insisted she had not been exposed to thallium during her studies. To investigate further, the hospital contacted Tsinghua University to determine what chemicals Zhu, as a chemistry student, might have come across. However, her medical records showed no exposure to potential triggers for her symptoms, leaving the medical team puzzled over her condition. Zhu's health seemed to have improved after a month, so she asked if she could continue studying. She wanted to take the exam and did not want to miss the entire semester. However, her parents disagreed, believing that stress had caused her illness, and worried that returning to university would worsen her health. Zhu pretended to have fully recovered and returned to class in February. Unfortunately, her condition rapidly deteriorated in March and she was hospitalized again. This time, her condition had deteriorated so much that she lost the ability to speak. Beige's frustration with the lack of answers from the local medical community led him to reach out to medical professionals around the world, not just in China, for help. He translated Zhu's symptoms into multiple languages and posted them on specialized online medical forums. Beige received his first response in less than 30 minutes, and over the next few days, he received nearly 2,000 emails from experts in 18 countries. Notably, many of these respondents were affiliated with prominent national health organizations and were experts in toxicology. Their answers, which were symptoms of thallium poisoning, causing her pain ranging from mild to severe. Thallium is a highly toxic metal that was once used in rat poison, but its use has been banned in many countries, including China and the United States, since the early 20th century. It was also used to treat lice infestations, although a known side effect was hair loss. The symptoms of thallium poisoning can be very varied, leading to delayed diagnosis and often misdiagnosis by medical professionals. One of the challenges in identifying thallium poisoning is that it does not cause visible external signs, such as bruises or wounds. The progression of thallium poisoning typically occurs in stages. Initial symptoms begin with stomach upset and severe pain, followed by tremors, headaches, insomnia, and temporary blindness. As the poisoning progresses, the victim may experience extreme skin sensitivity, similar to a severe burn, making even light touch unbearable. Daily activities, such as getting dressed or lying in bed, may become a source of pain. In the late stages of thallium poisoning, neurological symptoms appear, including uncontrolled muscle movements, seizures, and partial or complete paralysis. This can eventually lead to significant cognitive impairment. In severe cases, such as Zhu's, thallium poisoning can cause a significant decline in cognitive ability, turning a top-achieving student into someone with the mental capacity of a 6-year-old. Beige worked with Zhu's parents to analyze numerous emails and quickly shared their findings with the medical team treating Zhu. However, the doctors treating Zhu were skeptical of the online contributor's proposed diagnosis, saying that detecting thallium in Zhu's body would require specific tests that could not be performed on-site. They also pointed out that thallium testing would require sending Zhu's blood to a specialized lab, and thallium is a rare and highly regulated substance. Even if thallium poisoning were the correct diagnosis, the doctors believed that an antidote would likely not be effective at that stage. This information shocked Zhu's loved ones, raising an important question: who would want to harm Zhu? One theory emerged that the target could be her parents, given their important jobs. Her father was a senior engineer at a national agency, a position that could involve handling sensitive information, and her mother was an engineer at a major Chinese company. However, this line of investigation has hit a dead end. The main goal now is to find out how the poison entered Zhu's body. In particular, no one on campus has symptoms similar to Zhu's. This suggests that Zhu either ingested or came into direct contact with the substance. Meanwhile, while Zhu was in the hospital, her personal items were mysteriously stolen from her dormitory. The stolen items included shampoo, contact lens case, lipstick, body soap, and even her water cup. Furthermore, the perpetrator seemed to be interested only in Zhu's belongings, marking a strange and unprecedented incident in the dormitory of such a prestigious university. Since there were no surveillance cameras on campus at the time, an investigation was needed to find out the answer. Because students are housed in separate rooms by gender, only current female students at Tsinghua University are allowed to enter the female dormitory. Neither alumni, graduate students, nor professors are allowed to enter the dormitory housing more than 100 young female students. During the investigation, the police investigated more than 20 suppliers of thallium, a toxic substance used in the production of optical lenses, electronic devices, and other products. The police scrutinized the procurement records and discovered that one supplier had supplied thallium to the chemistry department of Tsinghua University for research purposes. The investigation found that only a small group of people at the university had access to the thallium, namely 2 professors, 3 graduate students, and 2 seniors. It is likely that the criminals were involved in these experiments, so they had the opportunity to obtain the thallium and had the opportunity to take personal belongings from Zhu's dorm room. As the investigation continued, the professors and graduate students were quickly eliminated as suspects because they were not allowed into the female dormitory. This left 2 senior students as prime suspects, 1 male and 1 female. However, since male students were not allowed into the female dormitory, everyone turned their attention to the female student. Surprisingly, this student was revealed to be Zhu's close friend Sunny, who is now the prime suspect in Zhu's case. Mutual friends of Sunny and Zhu mentioned that Zhu had recently won against Sunny in the student election. Sunny was known to not accept defeat easily. She was argumentative by nature and had cheated on Zhu several times. As Zhu achieved more success and recognition, Sunny became increasingly agitated. The final straw was Zhu's stellar performance at the Beijing Symphony Hall, which further strained their relationship. Zhu's exceptional beauty, talent, and admiration from both her peers and faculty may have fueled Sunny's jealousy, leading to the heartbreaking incident. Sunny was interrogated for 8 hours before her parents took her home. Her family is influential at Tsinghua University, with her father a key figure in the Democratic Revolutionary Committee and her grandfather a former vice president. Most of her relatives hold government or academic positions at top state universities. As a result, Zhu's case remains unsolved. Sunny maintains her innocence, claiming that the police have cleared her of all suspicion. However, she changed her name and date of birth, married an American, and moved to the United States. Zhu's condition, on the other hand, was worsened by the late diagnosis of thallium poisoning. By the time the diagnosis was confirmed, the thallium levels in her body were already alarmingly high, and treatment with the antidote Prussian blue was ineffective. The poisoning left Zhu permanently disabled, with irreversible nerve damage, resulting in the mental capacity of a 6-year-old child. Zhu's family received $14,000 in compensation from the hospital for mishandling her medical records, and the police quietly closed the investigation without informing them. Zhu Ling survived the incident for 50 years, but the perpetrators were never brought to justice. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Deborah Newell. Deborah Newell was a highly successful and affluent woman who had built her fortune through hard work and dedication in the interior design industry. After years of climbing the ranks, she founded her own design firm, Ambrosia, where she spent 3 decades pursuing her passion. Regardless her professional success, her personal life was a different story. She had been married 4 times, but each union ended in divorce. While she was a devoted mother to her 4 children, but her with an intense desire for a happier home life. A few years ago, her family experienced a tragedy. Her sister, Cindy, was brutally murdered by her husband, Billy Vickers, in March 1984. What's more heartbreaking is that their mother testified against Cindy and supported Billy throughout the trial. As a result, Billy spent only a few years in prison for his heinous crime. Deborah was deeply affected by the tragedy, leaving her with anxiety and lingering fear of guns. Despite being encouraged by friends to purchase a pistol for protection, she was unable to bear the thought of having a gun near her, and she lived alone for a long time. Deborah prioritized her physical appearance and lifestyle. She invested significant time and money in skin care, makeup, and hair, and surrounded herself with luxurious items from brands like Chanel, Cartier, Denam, and Gucci. Despite her beautiful life, Deborah felt incomplete without a loving partner. John Meehan was born on February 3, 1958, in California. He grew up with his sisters, Karen and Donna. John's life was influenced by his father, who taught him dishonest ways. This led John to get involved in scams, deal with illegal substances, and often have run-ins with the law, ultimately forcing him to leave California in 1988. After completing his undergraduate studies at Arizona State University with a Bachelor of Arts degree, John went on to join the law faculty at the University of Dayton. His striking looks, 6 feet and 3 inches, with hazel green eyes and dark hair, earned him the nickname Dirty John from his friends. He possessed a natural charm that effortlessly attracted women. After John finished his academic journey, he met Tanya Sells, a nurse anesthetist, and they got married in November 1990. Tanya was 25 years old, and John was 31. However, their relationship was built on lies, and John kept his family away from Tanya, telling her they were bad people. Tanya supported John's education as an anesthesiologist while attending medical school in Tennessee. She also helped him get his license to practice anesthesiology. The couple had 2 children, but their marriage began to fall apart over time. Tanya eventually discovered the truth about John's past from his mother and sisters. She also found out that John had been stealing pills from his patients and was addicted to them, which explained his cause of his short temper. Tanya immediately reported John to the police. After an investigation, John admitted his wrongdoing, but instead of surrendering, he left the state and went into hiding at a hotel in Michigan. However, the police found John easily and discovered him unconscious in his hotel room, surrounded by empty pill containers. An ambulance was called, but on the way to the hospital, John woke up, grabbed a medication, and jumped out of the ambulance. He was caught again and eventually sentenced to 6 years in prison in Michigan for resisting arrest and possessing illegal drugs. John spent just 17 months in prison. Then, his sentence was reduced and he was released in 2004. During this time, he met Deborah through online dating. John, then 55, and Deborah, then 59, had both decided to give online dating a try. Deborah was immediately drawn to John's profile, which pretended he was a divorced doctor and a Christian looking for love. Despite having a string of unsuccessful dates, Deborah was delighted to meet John in person. He showed genuine interest in her life and accomplishments, which made her feel appreciated. This was a refreshing change for Deborah, who had been disappointed by her previous dating experiences. John and Deborah's first date took place at a restaurant in Irvine, California, in October 2014. John's aim was to make a great impression on Deborah, which he achieved by sharing false stories about his past. He told her that he had worked with Doctors Without Borders in Iraq, had 2 children, and owned multiple properties. Deborah was captivated by the image of a selfless doctor who had dedicated his life to helping others. John treated Deborah with kindness and respect, making her feel like a queen. This was exactly what Deborah had been longing for, genuine affection. John's charming words left Deborah smitten, and she invited him to her penthouse after dinner. However, John crossed the line this time. After a few kisses, he tried to get intimate with Deborah, but she didn't feel comfortable, so she asked him to leave. The next morning, John apologized profusely, attributing his behavior to too much alcohol and an inability to control his emotions. This admission won back Deborah's trust, and their relationship continued to blossom. As their love progresses, Deborah and John spent more time together. On their third date, he expressed his love for Deborah and proposed to her. She was thrilled with their connection and chose to overlook some red flags. One notable instance was when John wore worn and somewhat unclean medical scrubs to a charity event hosted by Deborah, claiming he hadn't had time to change. Despite this, Deborah proudly introduced him to her friends as her doctor, and they took photos together. Their connection deepened, and they eventually decided to move in together. Deborah's daughter Jason lived with her in the penthouse. Jason was unhappy with the men her mother was dating, and in particular, she had concerns about John. Jason found it unusual that her mother, who had impeccable taste and favored designer brands like Gucci, was in a relationship with someone who wore dirty, unkempt clothing. Jason noticed him showing curiosity about the artwork in her mother's apartment, almost as if he was determining its value. After only meeting for 5 weeks, John convinced Deborah that they should live separately, and they rented a house on Balboa Island's waterfront for $6,500 per month. Deborah paid $80,000 up front to cover several months of rent. However, John opted not to put his name on the lease, citing tax complications as the reason. Deborah was deeply smitten with John and took care of all the expenses, covering everything herself. Unbeknownst to her children, she couldn't understand why they didn't approve of he. John shows Deborah concern for her by making her coffee every morning, helping her with shopping, and generally making her life simpler. Deborah believed that she had finally found her ideal partner and was hopeful that her children would accept him. She envisioned a future where they all came together as a harmonious family. Then, Deborah intended to introduce John to her younger daughter, Tara, who was known for being more laid back and easygoing compared to Jason. Tara visited her mother, Deborah, and John on the day they moved into their new home. Upon meeting he for the first time, Tara felt uneasy due to his unfriendly behavior and lack of enthusiasm for the move. Despite Tara's initial doubts, she decided to give him a chance. However, her worries about John increased due to some suspicious signs. For example, John claimed to own homes in Newport Beach and Palm Springs, but he never discussed them going there to visit or moving there. He also didn't own a car. What's more, he spent most of his days at home, often playing video games. Just before Thanksgiving, Tara decided to secretly go through John's belongings and stumbled upon a nurse's certificate with his name on it. Realizing that John is not the doctor he said he was, Tara confronted him about this. This led to a huge outburst from John, who became angry and began yelling at Tara for trying to ruin her mother's happiness. He insists that Tara will fail to separate them. Deborah just stood there, listening, and eventually, a big argument broke out and ended with Tara leaving the house. John took advantage of the situation to manipulate Deborah into believing that her children were only interested in her wealth and were waiting for her to pass away, thus they not wanting her to be happy. On the eve of Thanksgiving, Deborah's extremely religious mother, Arlene, visited. However, John's attempt to present himself as a religious man in front of Arlene backfires and leads to more arguments. Following this incident, Deborah sought the advice of a psychotherapist. They have advised her to set boundaries with her children and strive for a peaceful life, advice that she chose to follow. Deborah and John moved to Balboa Island, where they enjoyed dining at local restaurants and taking leisurely strolls while admiring the beautiful scenery. Although Deborah was incredibly happy, but she was still worried about John's choice of outfit. His wardrobe consisted mainly of old medical scrubs, loose-fitting and frayed pants, and worn-out shirts. Deborah, on the other hand, wanted he to dress fashionably and complement her lifestyle. He attributed his lack of finer clothes to having them stolen during his time in Iraq. To address this issue, she took John shopping and bought him a complete set of high-end designer outfits. In early December, John went with Deborah on a work-related trip to Las Vegas, where they made the sudden decision to get married after knowing each other for less than 2 months. Deborah chose not to tell her children about this development. Around that time, a mysterious woman managed to get into John and Deborah's home. He used this incident to convince Deborah that they needed better security. He then set up several surveillance cameras around the house that he could control with his smartphone. He even put cameras in Deborah's office, where he could keep an eye on her activities. John's goal was to have complete control over Deborah. As time went on, Deborah started asking John about his family and life before they met. Every time she asked, he came up with a quick excuse or justification, even though his answers didn't quite add up. Deborah dismissed her doubts, thinking she had found the perfect partner. However, her children, especially Jason, were still wary of John. Since he didn't own a car, John used Deborah's, which led Tara and Jacelyn to investigate his activities. They installed a tracking device on John's car to monitor his movements. When this yielded no results, they decided to hire a private investigator to investigate further. The investigators' findings were shocking. John had filed for bankruptcy, held a nursing license but not a medical license, and had lived in multiple states, including Arizona, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and California. Furthermore, he had been in the Orange County Jail. When Tara and Jason shared these things with their mother, Deborah, she remained unwavering, stating that her love for John would not change, even if the things were true. In late March, Deborah received a letter meant for John. The letter was from a former prison inmate, but before she could read it, he hastily took it from her. Initially, he was very angry, accusing her of not trusting him. He later claimed that the letter was from a friend he was providing emotional support to. Deborah was uneasy about John's explanation, and her concerns grew. The day after discovering lies, when John's left for work, and she decided to search through his belongings. This search revealed shocking truths about he. She found out that he was a former nurse anesthetist who had become addicted to pain medication, which led to his arrest and the downfall of his career. What's more disturbing is that Deborah discovers that he is a scammer and has been stealing from women he meets online. As Deborah searched further, she found court records showing that John had a search warrant issued for his storage unit. When authorities searched the unit, they found a handgun, bullets, a GPS tracker, syringes, and other suspicious items. This information was alarming. But what caught Deborah's attention was that he had multiple restraining orders against him from different women. The most unsettling fact, however, was that John had been released from prison on October 8th and had met Deborah just days later. Too overwhelmed by these facts, Deborah felt a mix of shock and fear. She realized that John was a violent felon who posed a big threat to her and her children. Despite the danger, Deborah decided to calm and waited for the right moment to take action. When John left for the hospital due to back problems, Deborah seized the opportunity. With her family's help, she quickly moved out of the house while he was away. During the process of packing John's belongings, Deborah discovered some disturbing documents, online comments from other women warning about John's manipulative nature. These comments described him as a skilled deceiver who used his charm and good looks to manipulate others. Convinced that John was unstable, Deborah decided to end their relationship and leave. However, John continued to message her, apologizing and asking her to visit him in the hospital. Feeling guilty, she eventually gave in to his requests. By June 2015, he had managed to persuade Deborah to reconcile with him. He offers a defense about the objects she found and confesses to hiding his past, believing she wouldn't care about it if he were honest. He admitted to lying about being a doctor to impress her and now begged for her help to turn his life around. Deborah decided to give her husband another chance and they moved to a new apartment in Irvine. However, her children were unhappy about the decision and did not want to see her. As a result, Deborah and John temporarily kept a distance from the children. In March 2016, Deborah had been trying to help John overcome his addiction for over a year, during which they had been married. Unfortunately, Deborah's entire family, particularly her daughter Jason, disliked John, and he doesn't like Jason either. The tension between them had grown so severe that John prohibited Deborah from seeing Jason. To make matters worse, John contacted Jason's real estate school, slandering her in front of the teachers. He also sent Jason threatening and vulgar messages, telling her that her mother didn't want anything to do with her. Although he appears to be recovering from rehab, the more cruel and aggressive he became. By April 2016, Deborah finally reached the limit of her tolerance. She wanted to end her relationship peacefully, so she started withdrawing money from her bank account to protect it. $30,000 was hidden in a lower drawer in her home. When John discovered the money, he claimed it belonged to him. And his behavior became increasingly aggressive as he had to accept the fact that their marriage would end in divorce. Realizing she needed to escape, Deborah took some personal items and moved to her friend Jacqueline's apartment in Irvine, which had a secure complex with multiple surveillance cameras. She attempted to obtain a restraining order but was denied by an Orange County judge. John lived in another state and was doing no harm, so all she could do was end the relationship and try to move on. After they separated, John moved to one of Deborah's house in Nevada. Despite her ignoring his calls, he persisted in contacting her. On June 11, 2016, John made another move, aimed at getting Deborah's attention. That day, Deborah drove her Jaguar to work and parked it in the office parking lot. During her work hours, the car was stolen. It was later found about a block and a half away, drenched in gasoline. The car had not been set on fire, it sustained minor damage. Security footage clearly identified John as the perpetrator of the theft. On the evening of August 20, 2016, Tara returned home from work and parked her car in the lot. As she stepped out of the vehicle, she was suddenly confronted by John, who approached her with a knife. He attempted to drag her back into the car, but Tara resisted and screamed for help. In the ensuing struggle, John tried to cover her mouth, but she managed to bite him. Tara, wearing heavy boots, used her leverage to kick John and knock the knife out of his hand. Seizing the opportunity, she picked up the knife and stabbed John multiple times, inflicting a total of 13 wounds. Her final strike was particularly severe, as it pierced his eye. A neighbor witnessed the struggle and rushed to Tara's aid, providing her with a towel to treat her injuries and calling the police. Despite his severe injuries, John was still alive when the paramedics arrived. A search of his car revealed evidence of his sinister intentions, including duct tape, cable ties, kitchen knives, and a passport, suggesting that he had planned to abduct Tara and escape the city with her as a hostage. John was hospitalized for 4 days to receive critical care, but unfortunately, his injuries were fatal and he passed away at the age of 57. After his death, his body was cremated and a memorial service was not held. Deborah and her children were severely affected by this. It took a while for Deborah to readjust to her normal life, but the memory still haunts her. She struggles with feelings of guilt for introducing a criminal into her family's life. As a result, Deborah has become extremely vigilant about her safety, carrying a stun gun and pepper spray with her at all times. She has vowed never to meet anyone online again,